Hello there. Welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, where your imagination can roam even while you rest. Tonight, you lie back, close your eyes, and let your breath fall into a steady rhythm, while I tell you a story that is both ancient and futuristic, both familiar and strange. A story about you, and about us, and about the strange possibility that everything around us, the trees outside your window, the hum of your own thoughts, even the stars in their places, might all be part of a test. Not the kind of test you remember from school, with pencils, papers, and nervous glances at the clock. This test is deeper, stranger, the kind of test where you do not know the rules, the questions, or the grading system. And here's the cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive it, at least not in the way you expect. Before we dive too far, let me ask, where are you right now? Are you tucked beneath warm blankets, a dim lamp glowing nearby, or are you listening with headphones as night presses against your window? What time is it? Past midnight, maybe, or still early in the evening when the city outside hasn't quieted yet? I'd love to know. Leave me a note in the comments. Tell me where you are listening from, and if you feel so kind, like this video, subscribe, and let's keep wandering through these late-night worlds together. But don't worry. That thought is not meant to frighten you. It's meant to set you free, to remind you that the pressure you feel in everyday life is just a faint echo of something larger, a bigger exam written into the fabric of the cosmos itself. Tonight, I want you to walk with me, second by second, through that possibility. What if Earth, the only home you've ever known, was itself a test? Think of history, every civilization you've heard about, from the builders of the pyramids who aligned stone with the stars, to the scholars in ancient China who inked philosophies onto bamboo strips, to the wandering philosophers of Greece debating under olive trees. They were all, in some sense, trying to decode the rules of this test. The Mayans tracked eclipses as if the sky were a ticking clock. Medieval scholars pored over scriptures and star maps alike, hoping to find the teacher's answer key. You live now in a world of smartphones, telescopes, and particle colliders, and still the sense lingers. Perhaps life is measuring you, tallying something invisible. Now, let's imagine you are holding a test paper, but instead of numbers and letters, it is written in oceans and mountains, seasons and storms, kindnesses and cruelties. The exam begins the moment you draw your first breath, and it ends in silence, whether or not you've ever figured out what the questions really were. And here's a quirky tidbit to keep you awake a little longer. In ancient Egypt, people believed that when you died, your heart would be weighed against a feather, too heavy with sin, and you failed, lighter than the feather, and you passed. It was, in a way, one of the earliest cosmic grading systems ever imagined. You can almost picture it, a giant balance in the sky, waiting at the edge of time. Scientists still argue whether that old myth was purely symbolic, or whether it hints at something universal, that humans across cultures instinctively sense the presence of a final exam. Our planet tilts on its axis, about 23.5 degrees, giving rise to seasons. That tilt keeps your world from being locked in endless summer or endless winter. Imagine if it hadn't tilted at all. Crops might never grow in balance, and migrations of animals would falter. Entire histories of food, culture, and trade might never have existed. Scientists still argue whether Earth's tilt was a coincidence of collision long ago, or whether something or someone nudged it into place. So let's lean closer to the question. If Earth is a test, what exactly is it testing? Perhaps patience, in the way seasons roll slowly, teaching you to wait. Perhaps resilience, in the way disasters strike, demanding recovery. Or maybe it is measuring compassion as you encounter others trudging through their own exam papers, messy with erasures and mistakes. You start to notice how the planet itself seems designed for just such a test. Too close to the sun and oceans would boil, too far and they would freeze. Instead, Earth sits in a narrow band, a zone astronomers call the Goldilocks zone, where water can remain liquid. Not too hot, not too cold, as if someone had tuned the temperature knob to the middle setting. You feel the question lurking, is that just luck, or was it a condition set for the exam? Close your eyes and picture the night sky. Stars wheel overhead, steady enough to guide ancient sailors across oceans. The constellations you recognize tonight are the same ones painted on cave walls thousands of years ago. That persistence, that steadiness, feels almost like a hint, as if the test wanted to make sure you had reference points to find your way. You think about the magnetic field, an invisible shield that blocks deadly radiation from the sun. Without it, the atmosphere would be stripped away, and oceans would vanish into space. Yet here it is, humming under your feet, generated by molten iron swirling deep in the core. You never see it, but every compass needle is quietly reminding you the test is still running. But here is another twist. In tests, there are always trick questions. Earth, too, has its traps, diseases that sweep through villages, earthquakes that split the ground, extinctions that erase entire species 5 times over in the past 500 million years. The dinosaurs, for example, might have thought themselves eternal rulers until a rock fell from the sky and changed the grading rubric overnight. Think of yourself again, right now, lying in your bed or listening through your earbuds. You are both participant and observer, caught in a game you cannot opt out of. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point, to live inside the question without ever receiving the final score. Even today, when scientists stare into telescopes and decode strands of DNA, the question remains unsolved. Are we graded by knowledge, by compassion, by endurance, or by something entirely beyond our imagining? And so you drift with me, step by step, through this mystery, letting the rhythm of the words lull you, even as the thought unsettles you. Now imagine yourself sitting alone in a silent classroom. The exam is in front of you, but there is no teacher pacing between the rows, no chalk squeaking at the board, no whispered instructions. You are being tested, but without rules, without a visible proctor. That is the unnerving part, isn't it? When you don't know what is being measured, every choice feels both trivial and monumental. Do you share your food? Do you lie to spare someone's feelings? Do you climb the mountain or stay in the valley? Perhaps the test is not about the actions themselves, but about the reasons behind them. Hello there. Welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, where your imagination can roam, even while you rest. Tonight, you lie back, close your eyes, and let your breath fall into a steady rhythm, while I tell you a story that is both ancient and futuristic, both familiar and strange. A story about you, and about us, and about the strange possibility that everything around us, the trees outside your window, the hum of your own thoughts, even the stars in their places, might all be part of a test. Not the kind of test you remember from school, with pencils, papers, and nervous glances at the clock. This test is deeper, stranger, the kind of test where you do not know the rules, the questions, or the grading system. And here's the cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive it, at least not in the way you expect. But don't worry. That thought is not meant to frighten you. It's meant to set you free, to remind you that the pressure you feel in everyday life is just a faint echo of something larger, a bigger exam written into the fabric of the cosmos itself. Tonight, I want you to walk with me, second by second, through that possibility. What if Earth, the only home you've ever known, was itself a test? Before we dive too far, let me ask, where are you right now? Are you tucked beneath warm blankets, a dim lamp glowing nearby, or are you listening with headphones as night presses against your window? What time is it? Past midnight, maybe, or still early in the evening, when the city outside hasn't quieted yet? I'd love to know. Leave me a note in the comments, tell me where you are listening from, and if you feel so kind, like this video, subscribe, and let's keep wandering through these late-night worlds together. Breathe slowly. Let the test paper fade. Let the whisper of oceans, winds, and distant stars remind you that you are part of something vast, strange, and perhaps deliberate. We have only just begun to explore the exam hall called Earth. Now, let's imagine you are holding a test paper, but instead of numbers and letters, It is written in oceans and mountains, seasons and storms, kindnesses and cruelties. The exam begins the moment you draw your first breath, and it ends in silence, whether or not you've ever figured out what the questions really were. Think of history. Every civilization you've heard about, from the builders of the pyramids who aligned stone with the stars, to the scholars in ancient China who inked philosophies onto bamboo strips, to the wandering philosophers of Greece debating under olive trees, they were all, in some sense, trying to decode the rules of this test. The Mayans tracked eclipses as if the sky were a ticking clock. Medieval scholars pored over scriptures and star maps alike, hoping to find the teacher's answer key. You live now in a world of smartphones, telescopes, and particle colliders, and still the sense lingers perhaps life is measuring you, tallying something invisible. And here's a quirky tidbit to keep you awake a little longer. In ancient Egypt, people believed that when you died, your heart would be weighed against a feather, too heavy with sin, and you failed, lighter than the feather, and you passed. It was in a way one of the earliest cosmic grading systems ever imagined. You can almost picture it, a giant balance in the sky, waiting at the edge of time. Scientists still argue whether that old myth was purely symbolic, or whether it hints at something universal, that humans across cultures instinctively sense the presence of a final exam. Imagine you are sitting at a desk with nothing but a blank sheet, no headings, no questions written at the top, just empty space. The instructor has left the room. You look around. No one else seems to know what to do either. Some begin writing furiously, hoping that volume itself will count. Others sit still, paralyzed, afraid that any mark might be wrong. You realize then that the test is not about the sheet at all. It is about how you respond to uncertainty. That may be the hidden nature of Earth's exam. Not a matter of correct answers, but a revelation of how you act when no answers are given. History offers you an endless record of humanity grappling with this puzzle. Ancient Stoics, for example, argued that life's purpose was to align with nature's order, even if the rules were invisible. They believed discipline and inner calm were the only answers you could ever truly control. Meanwhile, in other corners of the world, shamans listened to wind and water, reading them as if they were exam questions. Every culture in its own way looked at the empty page of existence and filled it with meaning. You roll over in the quiet of your own mind, still wondering what it means to call Earth a test. If the idea unsettled you at first, now it begins to take on a different flavor. A test with no clear instructions is, after all, not about memorization or recall. It is about who you become in the process. You think about the tests you've taken before, not just on paper, but in life itself. The arguments that pressed your patience, the challenges that demanded resilience, the moments you were asked to choose between what was easy and what was right. Each time, there were no instructions handed to you. You were guided only by the whisper of conscience, by the patterns you'd noticed in the world, by an inner sense that certain answers were better than others. Perhaps Earth itself is a magnified version of that. And yet, there is a danger in thinking too literally, because if the test hides its questions, perhaps it hides its answers as well. Maybe there are no right or wrong boxes to tick. Maybe the real exam is subtler, how you treat others when you are uncertain, how you navigate moral fog when the map is blank. That in itself is unsettling. Here's a curious tidbit. In medieval Europe, some people believed comets were divine signs, almost like notes scribbled in the margins of the test. A bright streak across the sky was read as warning or omen, demanding that entire kingdoms rethink their choices. Imagine it, a celestial red pen sweeping across the heavens. Scientists still argue whether these ancient interpretations were superstition alone, or whether they represented a deep psychological instinct to find instructions in the chaos. You too feel that pull. Every rainbow, every earthquake, every unexpected storm could be read as feedback, marks on the test sheet. Consider a child learning to walk. No one hands the child a manual. There are no written instructions taped to the crib. Instead, the child stumbles, falls, rises, tries again. The measure of success is not in avoiding failure, but in persisting through it. Could Earth's test be written in that same invisible ink, not asking you to be flawless, but to continue moving forward despite the falls? You roll over in the quiet of your own mind, still wondering what it means to call Earth a test. If the idea unsettled you at first, now it begins to take on a different flavor. A test with no clear instructions is, after all, not about memorization or recall. It is about who you become in the process. You think about the tests you've taken before, not just on paper, but in life itself. The arguments that pressed your patience, the challenges that demanded resilience, the moments you were asked to choose between what was easy and what was right. Each time, there were no instructions handed to you. You were guided only by the whisper of conscience, by the patterns you'd noticed in the world, by an inner sense that certain answers were better than others. Perhaps Earth itself is a magnified version of that. Imagine you are sitting at a desk with nothing but a blank sheet, no headings, no questions written at the top, just empty space. The instructor has left the room. You look around. No one else seems to know what to do either. Some begin writing furiously, hoping that volume itself will count. Others sit still, paralyzed, afraid that any mark might be wrong. You realize then that the test is not about the sheet at all. It is about how you respond to uncertainty. That may be the hidden nature of Earth's exam. Not a matter of correct answers, but a revelation of how you act when no answers are given. History offers you an endless record of humanity grappling with this puzzle. Ancient Stoics, for example, argued that life's purpose was to align with nature's order, even if the rules were invisible. They believed discipline and inner calm were the only answers you could ever truly control. Meanwhile, in other corners of the world, shamans listened to wind and water, reading them as if they were exam questions. Every culture in its own way looked at the empty page of existence and filled it with meaning. Here's a curious tidbit. In medieval Europe, some people believed comets were divine signs, almost like notes scribbled in the margins of the test. A bright streak across the sky was read as warning or omen, demanding that entire kingdoms rethink their choices. Imagine it, a celestial red pen sweeping across the heavens. Scientists still argue whether these ancient interpretations were superstition alone, or whether they represented a deep psychological instinct to find instructions in the chaos. You too feel that pull. Every rainbow, every earthquake, every unexpected storm could be read as feedback, marks on the test sheet. And yet, there is a danger in thinking too literally, because if the test hides its questions, perhaps it hides its answers as well. Maybe there are no right or wrong boxes to tick. Maybe the real exam is subtler, how you treat others when you are uncertain, how you navigate moral fog when the map is blank. That in itself is unsettling. Consider a child learning to walk. No one hands the child a manual. There are no written instructions taped to the crib. Instead, the child stumbles, falls, rises, tries again. The measure of success is not in avoiding failure, but in persisting through it. Could Earth's test be written in that same invisible ink, not asking you to be flawless, but to continue moving forward despite the falls? The invisible instructions idea becomes clearer when you zoom out to the structure of nature itself. You know by now that the universe is not handing out obvious cues. There are no glowing arrows in the sky pointing toward good or bad. Instead, there are balances and counterbalances, temptations and difficulties. The fertile soil that grows your food is also the ground that quakes beneath your feet. The same rivers that nourish fields also flood and destroy. It's almost as if the world was designed to be both gift and obstacle at once, forcing you to choose how you'll respond. And here is a sobering thought. If this really is a test, you may not get to see your own grade. Think of all the generations who lived before you, people who built cities now buried in desert sands, who wrote poems on clay tablets that crumble at a touch. They never knew how history would remember them, if at all. They never received feedback from the proctor of existence. They simply lived, made choices, passed on what they could. Perhaps that is the exam's trick. You take it, but you never hold the score sheet. Let your imagination drift to a moment in the Middle Ages. A villager walks beneath the towering walls of a cathedral. The bells ring overhead. The villager has no science textbook, no telescope, no access to the mysteries of physics, but they believe their daily choices are being weighed. Feed the hungry, help a neighbor, endure hardship. Each action is recorded somewhere, even if no parchment shows it. Now leap across time to you, lying in your own bed, listening to this story. The sense is the same. Actions ripple outward, invisible instructions written in the currents of life itself. The lack of instructions can feel like a trap, but it may also be a gift, because without fixed rules you are free to create meaning, to build patterns of value that become your own. Imagine a classroom where every student writes a different essay, and all are graded not by conformity, but by honesty of effort. That could be Earth's exam. Not a standardized test, but an open-ended one. Of course, skeptics argue otherwise. They claim the universe is indifferent, that there is no test, only random chance unfolding. To them, the absence of instructions is proof that no teacher exists. And scientists still argue whether the fine balances you see, the tilt of Earth, the rare stability of the Sun, the shielding role of Jupiter, are coincidences or evidence of deeper structure. The debate remains open, as perhaps it must, because if certainty arrived, the exam would lose its power. Think now about your own life. Have you not noticed how the hardest choices arrive without instructions? A friendship falters, a loved one is ill, a path splits before you, and both directions seem possible. No one gives you a clear guide, you decide, and then you live with the consequence. Maybe this is where the test is most visible, not in the sweep of stars, but in the quiet of your own decisions. You turn over again in bed, eyes closed, picturing the invisible instructions etched in every breath. Earth may be a test without a key, but still, every moment feels like an answer waiting to be written, and whether you pass or fail may not matter as much as whether you keep writing at all. You breathe slowly, and the thought deepens. If Earth is a test, then perhaps the planet itself is the exam paper, and every detail of its construction is a line of the questions. You don't have to look far to see them. Tilt your head back, imagine floating above the Earth, and what you'd notice are the settings, small but crucial dials that make this world possible. You realize that even the tiniest adjustments in these settings would change everything, perhaps enough to erase the very possibility of you lying here, listening to this voice. The test is written into the stage itself. You begin with the obvious, the position of the Earth. Astronomers call it the habitable zone, a band around a star where temperatures are not too hot, not too cold. It sounds like a fairy tale. The Goldilocks zone. Earth sits comfortably within it, allowing water to remain liquid. Liquid water, that universal ingredient for life as you know it. Too close to the sun, and oceans would have boiled away into steam. Too far, and they would be locked in unbroken ice. It feels less like chance and more like a question deliberately placed on the page. Can life exist when the balance is this precise? But the balance doesn't stop there. You think of Earth's axis, tilted at about 23.5 degrees. That tilt is what creates the seasons. Without it, large swaths of the planet would sit in constant extremes. Crops would fail to flourish in steady cycles. Animals would find no rhythm to migrate. Civilizations would struggle against monotony and scarcity. Scientists still argue whether the tilt was a result of an ancient collision, perhaps with a Mars-sized body, or whether it was one of those cosmic quirks that just happened to fall into place. Either way, the tilt became part of the exam conditions. Imagine if your own test paper was written with ink that shifts when tilted under the light. The challenge changes depending on how you hold it. And then there is the atmosphere. You may not notice it as you breathe right now, but it is as crucial as any exam instruction sheet. Mostly nitrogen, a healthy portion of oxygen, and just enough carbon dioxide to trap warmth. Too much oxygen, and even a small spark would turn your world into wildfire. Too much carbon dioxide, and the planet would suffocate in unbearable heat. Too little, and the world would be cold, lifeless, sterile. You imagine the atmosphere as a fragile veil stretched around the globe like translucent paper. One gust too strong, and it could have been torn away, yet it remains, the protective cover of the exam booklet. A quirky fact drifts into your thoughts. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder once warned about bad airs, miasmas, invisible vapors he believed carried disease. Of course, he didn't know about bacteria or viruses, but the intuition was there. The air itself could be both shield and threat. The atmosphere is not only life's protector, but also its challenge, for within it float pathogens, storms, and ash. The exam includes hazards mixed in with the benefits. Beneath your feet, there is another quiet miracle. Deep within the core of the earth, molten iron spins and swirls, generating a magnetic field, invisible but essential. This field deflects solar winds, streams of charged particles from the sun that could strip the atmosphere away. Mars, once possibly flowing with rivers and lakes, lost much of its magnetic shield. Its air thinned, its water vanished, its test perhaps cut short. You on Earth live under the cover of a guardian you never see, like an unseen proctor, shielding your desk from being blown away in a storm. Scientists still argue whether this dynamo will remain stable for billions more years, or whether someday the exam conditions will change abruptly and the shield will fail. Lift your eyes again to the sun. It burns at just the right steadiness. Stars of similar size sometimes flare unpredictably, releasing massive bursts of radiation. If Earth's star were less stable, every species here would have faced extinction long before humans arrived. The fact that the sun has burned for billions of years with such unusual calmness feels like a test condition carefully set. The candle burns long enough for you to take your exam, but not forever. Now consider the placement of the other planets, especially Jupiter. That giant swirling gas world serves as a gravitational shield, capturing or flinging away many of the comets and asteroids that might otherwise slam into Earth. Imagine a huge guardian standing at the edge of your classroom, blocking projectiles so you can focus on your test. But it doesn't block them all. Every so often one slips past, like the one that struck 66 million years ago, bringing the age of dinosaurs to a sudden end. The test, it seems, is never too easy. You think again of those dinosaurs. Once rulers of the earth, they never knew their test had a time limit. They never guessed a single impact could erase their dominance. Yet from that extinction rose mammals, and eventually humans. The test resets, asking a new version of the question. The stage is layered with smaller details too. Trace elements like phosphorus, rare in the universe, are abundant enough here to form DNA, bones, and cells. Water exists in three forms: solid, liquid, vapor, shifting constantly through cycles that feed rivers, clouds, and glaciers. Mountains rise, erode, and crumble into fertile plains. Volcanoes erupt, dangerous and destructive, yet spreading rich minerals that nourish life in the long run. Each feature feels like a challenge and an opportunity combined, as though the test were designed not with multiple choice answers, but with complex essay prompts. Think about this for a moment. If you were to design a test for resilience, would you not create conditions that were mostly supportive, but occasionally perilous, enough difficulty to reveal true character, but not so much that all hope was extinguished? That is what Earth looks like from this vantage. A planet tuned to allow thriving, but never without struggle. You recall another historical fact, the Great Fire of London in 1666. It destroyed much of the city, yet afterwards streets were redesigned, fire codes written, and architecture reshaped for the centuries ahead. Out of destruction came renewal. The same rhythm echoes across geology and biology alike. Extinctions, quakes, floods, each catastrophe reshaping the test conditions, pushing life to adapt. And through all of this, you lie here, breathing steadily, reminded that you are part of the test as much as any mountain, river, or star. Your own body is tuned by the same balances: oxygen carried through blood, warmth regulated by skin, cells dividing with delicate timing. The test paper is not separate from you. You are written into its ink. Scientists still argue over what this all means. Is it simply chance, the rolling of cosmic dice that happen to fall in our favor? Or is it, as some suggest, evidence that the universe is fine-tuned, not by accident but by design, with Earth as the prime example? You may never know. Perhaps no one ever will, and yet the settings remain, steady and silent, like exam conditions set at the beginning and never change during the test. So you breathe again, noticing the balance in your own lungs: too little air, and you gasp; too much, and you choke. You live within the narrowest of margins, the exact settings written into the world itself. The stage is ready, the lights are steady, and the exam continues, waiting for the answers you write, not with pen and paper, but with the choices you make each day. The thought lingers, soft and insistent. The moon, that pale lantern in the night, might be more than just a companion in the sky. You imagine lying outside, eyes on its silver glow, and realizing that without it, your test paper would look entirely different. Earth without its moon would be a world tilted wildly, seasons chaotic, tides shallow and unsteady. The moon is not just decoration, it is one of the most important conditions of this exam. You let your mind drift back billions of years to when the Earth was young. Scientists still argue about how the moon was born. The prevailing idea is dramatic. A planet-sized body, often named Theia, collided with the infant Earth. From the wreckage, molten rock and vapor coalesced, forming a glowing sphere that eventually cooled into the moon. Others propose different origins. Perhaps Earth simply captured a wandering celestial body, or perhaps both formed together out of the same spinning cloud. The truth is still debated, like one of those exam questions where multiple answers seem possible. Yet, whatever its birth, the moon settled into orbit, and life has been under its steady influence ever since. You begin to notice its role as stabilizer. Without the moon, Earth's axial tilt would wobble far more dramatically over time. Instead of shifting gently between 22 and 24 degrees, it might swing chaotically, destabilizing climates, making long-term habitability fragile. Imagine trying to take a test on a desk that keeps tipping, spilling your ink, sliding your paper into chaos. The moon steadies the desk. It keeps your world tilted just enough to create stable seasons, but not so much that survival is impossible. And then there are the tides. Twice a day, water surges forward and retreats, drawn by the moon's pull. Long before cities and satellites, early life emerged in tidal pools, shallow waters where the rhythm of wet and dry allowed chemistry to dance. Molecules met, broke apart and rejoined, perhaps giving rise to the first steps of biology itself. Without the tides, the story of life might have taken a different path, or perhaps never begun at all. The moon's pull is not just a pretty swell of the ocean, it is one of the exam's most subtle, essential prompts. Think of ancient cultures. They tracked the moon with obsessive care, carving calendars into bone and stone, predicting its cycles as if studying the rhythms of the exam clock. Farmers planted by it, sailors guided themselves across oceans by its glow, poets compared it to love, loss, and longing. The moon became not only a physical guide but a cultural one, a symbol of time and fate. A quirky tidbit floats into your thoughts. In parts of medieval Europe, people believed the moon could cause madness. Lunacy, they called it, as if the test itself whispered challenges through moonlight. Now, you reflect on eclipses. The sheer coincidence that the moon is just the right size and just the right distance to perfectly cover the sun during an eclipse. No other known planet has such a phenomenon, where a moon can so precisely blot out its star. Was this another condition of the exam? A dramatic spectacle to remind you that alignments matter, that even in cosmic scales, timing is everything. When the sky goes dark in the middle of the day, the lesson feels pointed. The test will surprise you when you least expect it. But the moon's role goes beyond physical mechanics. It shapes how you feel. Its phases are like a silent clock, ticking above you, waxing and waning, reminding you of cycles, of change, of impermanence. You notice how different the world looks under a full moon versus a crescent. The light shapes mood, inspires rituals, creates stories. It is as if the examiners placed a lamp in the sky, one that shifts its brightness slowly, asking, how do you respond to subtle changes in illumination? Do you fear them, or do you adapt? You imagine standing on the shores of ancient Mesopotamia, watching the moonrise. Priests would read omens into its shape, kings would make decisions based on its glow, and farmers would trust it to time their planting. The moon was not simply distant rock, it was an active question on the test. What do you do with patterns when you see them in the sky? Entire civilizations built their calendars and faiths around their answer. Scientists today still debate its full influence. Some argue that without the moon, intelligent life might never have emerged at all, because Earth's climate would have been too unstable for long-term complexity to flourish. Others believe life would have adapted anyway, finding stability in other ways. This ongoing uncertainty is part of the exam itself. Even the scientists decoding the test paper cannot agree on the exact rules. And then there is you, now lying quietly as night wraps around you. The moon is probably shining somewhere above, its light crossing the vacuum, bouncing off oceans, spilling into windows, and reaching even you. It is easy to dismiss it as background, but when you frame it as part of a test, it becomes alive with intention. Every tide, every glow, every eclipse feels like a question mark. There's another quirky reminder of how deeply the moon is tied to your own existence. Ancient physicians once swore by moon milk, a chalky mineral found in caves, thought to be touched by lunar influence. It was used as a healing powder, a cure for ailments, a way to harness the moon's supposed medicine. Strange, perhaps, but also a glimpse into how humans instinctively read meaning into the world's balances. You too may catch yourself gazing at the moon and wondering if its light is a message. Think about how the moon pulls on you in subtler ways, not just through gravity, but through imagination. You write poems to it, sing songs under it, make wishes on its glow. It has always been a canvas for human longing, painted with faces, rabbits, and gods. The test seems designed not only to measure your survival, but to see what beauty you make out of simple, repeated patterns. And perhaps that is the most important role of all. The moon reminds you that tests are not only about endurance, they are about recognition, about noticing the extraordinary in the ordinary. That pale rock, hanging quietly above, could have been ignored as just another body in the sky, but humanity never ignored it. You looked up, and you wondered. That act of wonder may be one of the most vital answers the exam seeks. So breathe again, slowly. Let the image of the moon settle behind your eyes, steadying your world, pulling your tides, lighting your nights, keeping your seasons gentle. Whether by accident or intention, it has shaped the very possibility of your existence. The exam is not written in ink, but in silver light across dark skies. And every time you look up, you are reminded that the questions may be vast, but you are already living inside them. You drift now into the heartbeat of the planet beneath you. The surface that feels so solid under your feet is in truth never still. You may think of Earth as calm stone and unmoving ground, but the exam you are taking is written in restless movements. The continents slide like puzzle pieces across the globe. Mountains grow and crumble, volcanoes roar, and deep beneath it all, fire churns in endless patterns. This too is part of the test, a reminder that nothing you walk on is truly permanent. Imagine the ground splitting without warning. Earthquakes strike when tectonic plates grind, subduct, or slip past each other. Entire cities can fall in a matter of minutes. Yet the same shifting that causes earthquakes also recycles Earth's crust, renewing soil, cycling carbon, and regulating climate. If Earth had no tectonics, the surface might be static but barren, locked in sterile monotony. Instead, you live on a stage that cracks and remakes itself, as if the exam required you to write your answers on paper that erases itself even as you are writing. The mountains rise as slow questions posed over millions of years. The Himalayas, for example, are the visible scar of India's collision with Asia. They rise even now by fractions of an inch each year, as if time itself were carving essay prompts into stone. Scientists still argue whether the movement of these plates was inevitable in any rocky planet, or whether Earth is unusual, a rare exam paper with questions written in moving ink. Volcanoes, too, remind you of the double nature of the test. When they erupt, they destroy with fire and ash, erasing villages and landscapes in an instant, yet they also create. Volcanic rock weathers into fertile soil, rich with minerals. Civilizations from Indonesia to Italy have lived in volcanic shadows, weighed the risk and chosen to stay, because the same eruptions that destroy also feed. It is a cruel but elegant condition. Will you recognize that blessings and dangers are often the same line on the exam, read from two different angles? Think of Pompeii, a city frozen in time when Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE. Ash buried the streets, preserving everyday life in haunting detail. Bread still in ovens, frescoes still bright on walls. It is one of history's clearest reminders that Earth's exam is not merciful. The people of Pompeii did not know their clock had almost run out. They lived, as you do, inside a restless Earth, never certain which day would bring catastrophe. A quirky tidbit flickers into your thoughts. Some ancient cultures believed volcanoes were mouths of the gods, openings where divine judgments spilled out. In Hawaiian tradition, eruptions were tied to Pele, the goddess of fire, who tested her people with both destruction and renewal. It seems humanity has always sensed that the restless Earth was not just random violence, but a trial of some kind, a question asked in flames. Now picture the supercontinent Pangaea, which existed hundreds of millions of years ago. All land fused into one colossal mass, surrounded by a single vast ocean. Over time it broke apart, the pieces drifting into the continents you know today. Scientists still argue what long-term consequences such continental drift had for biodiversity, climate, and evolution. Without this fracturing, would species have remained trapped in smaller niches? Would humanity ever have emerged? You realize that tectonics are not just mechanics, they are exam questions, reshaping conditions, forcing adaptation, demanding new answers from every creature alive. You feel the presence of water in this story too. When continents shift, they redirect oceans, create currents, and alter climates. The rise of the Isthmus of Panama, about 3 million years ago, connected North and South America, split oceans, and triggered massive climate shifts. Ice ages followed. Humanity, in its fragile infancy, was shaped by this rearrangement of land and sea. The exam changes its format as you are writing, a sudden curveball in the questions, demanding that life learn to endure cold, scarcity, and migration. And always, beneath it all, fire. The mantle moves in convection currents, hot rock rising and cooler rock sinking, a slow churning that powers the plates above. It is the unseen ink of the exam, invisible but ever present, shaping continents while you sleep. You never feel it directly, but every mountain, every valley, every fertile plain is a result of its hand. You think of the restless Earth as both cruel and generous. It buries civilizations, but it also renews them. It erases landscapes, but it also builds new ones. In the same way, your own life may feel shattered at times. A loss, a collapse, a sudden earthquake within your days. Yet often, what feels like destruction clears the way for growth. The exam seems to ask, when the ground beneath you shifts, do you cling to what was, or do you learn to stand in new soil? Consider one more historical echo, the Lisbon earthquake of 1755, followed by fire and tsunami, destroying much of the city. It sent shockwaves not only through Portugal but through philosophy itself. Thinkers like Voltaire and Kant debated what it meant. Was it divine punishment, random cruelty, or part of some deeper natural law? Scientists still argue similar questions today, though with the language of geology rather than theology. Yet the human instinct remains the same, to search for meaning in catastrophe, to wonder what the question really is when the earth itself becomes the examiner. You lie still, imagining continents as papers sliding across a desk, volcanoes as red ink comments, earthquakes as sudden smudges on the page. The test is written in shifting land, and every movement beneath your feet is a reminder that permanence is an illusion. But there is something strangely comforting here too, because without this restlessness, Earth would not have soil rich enough to feed you. Without tectonics, there would be no mountains, no valleys, no varied climates to cradle biodiversity. Without eruptions, there would be no new land rising from the sea. The exam is hard, yes, but also strangely fair. It gives and it takes, in equal measure. So you breathe, slowly, letting the thoughts settle. You are walking on an answer sheet that moves as you write. Mountains rise to test your patience. Volcanoes roar to measure your resilience. Earthquakes strike to reveal your adaptability. And through it all, the planet continues its restless movements, silent proctor of the grandest exam. You drift now into the realm of water, the quiet companion of every life that has ever breathed. The seas, the rivers, the clouds drifting above, all of them shaping your existence. All of them reminders that this test you walk through is not written only in stone or starlight, but in liquid. Water is both question and answer, both challenge and comfort. If Earth is an exam, then water is the ink that fills its pages. You close your eyes and imagine the oceans, vast, restless bodies covering more than 2/3 of the planet. They are the cradle where life began, where single-celled organisms first flickered into being. Scientists still argue about the details. Some say life emerged in deep-sea vents, where mineral-rich fluids created chemical playgrounds. Others argue for shallow tidal pools, where cycles of drying and flooding gave molecules the chance to combine. But wherever it began, water was the stage. Without it, the test may never have started at all. Water is strange, almost magical in its properties. Unlike most substances, it becomes less dense when it freezes, so ice floats. That simple fact allows lakes and oceans to freeze on the surface, while liquid water remains below, protecting life from extinction each winter. If ice sank, bodies of water would freeze solid from the bottom up, entombing everything. The test might have ended long ago. Instead, Earth's rules allow life to persist under frozen skins, patient and waiting. Think of the hydrological cycle. Water evaporates from oceans, condenses into clouds, falls as rain, gathers into rivers, and returns to the sea. It is a constant recycling, a reminder that nothing here is static. The cycle feeds crops, fills aquifers, and carves canyons. It is both provider and destroyer. Floods wash away homes, droughts parch fields, storms sweep through with punishing force. Yet without these same cycles, the planet would be lifeless. The test seems designed to measure how you adapt to both gifts and losses, how you respond when the same element that nourishes you also takes away. There is a historical thread in this story too. The great Nile River, for example, was both blessing and trial. Its yearly floods deposited fertile silt, making Egypt's agriculture flourish. But the floods could also be unpredictable, sometimes too little, sometimes too much. Ancient priests tracked the cycles, watching the star Sirius rise in the dawn as a sign of the river's coming swell. Their entire civilization revolved around the rhythm of water, a test written in floods and fields. And here's a quirky tidbit to keep in mind. Roman women in certain eras were said to use crocodile dung mixed with water as an early form of sunscreen. Strange as it sounds, it shows how deeply humans have always tried to work with water, shield against its sunlit risks. Harness its power. The test is not just in survival but in ingenuity, in finding ways to twist nature's strange offerings into protection. Water's role in the exam goes deeper still. It is the universal solvent, dissolving more substances than any other liquid. Inside your body, it carries nutrients, removes waste, and keeps your cells alive. You are mostly water, a walking vessel of rivers and seas. Every drop inside you once traveled through clouds and soil, mountains and oceans. When you drink, you take in history. You are writing your answers with borrowed ink from the deep past. But water also reminds you of fragility. Too little, and civilizations collapse. The ancient city of Angkor, once the thriving heart of the Khmer Empire, built elaborate canals and reservoirs to manage its monsoons. When those systems failed, famine and decline followed. Too much water can also ruin, as with the great floods that shaped myths across cultures. Noah's Ark, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the stories of waves that reset humanity's test in dramatic fashion. Scientists still argue whether such floods were global cataclysms or regional events magnified by memory. But either way, they reveal how water has always been both examiner and scorekeeper. Look more closely, and water's trick questions appear everywhere. It can exist in 3 states at once: solid, liquid, gas, dancing between them with ease. Snow falling, rivers rushing, fog rolling over valleys. Few substances behave so flexibly, and so the exam asks, can you be like water? Can you adapt, shift, and change form while still remaining yourself? You remember how sailors once feared the sea, believing it hid monsters in its depths. They mapped coastlines cautiously, certain that beyond the horizon lay dragons. In truth, the oceans did hold terrors, storms, waves, hunger, mutiny, but they also held connection. The same seas that swallowed ships also carried explorers to new lands, connected cultures, spread stories. The test is double-edged, danger and opportunity bound together. Even now, the oceans challenge you. Rising seas from melting ice remind you that the test conditions are not static. Climate itself can change, and it asks how you will respond. Will you adapt, innovate, cooperate, or will you stumble, ignoring the question until the exam time runs out? You let your imagination drift into a quieter corner, snow falling on a winter night. Each flake is water frozen into crystal, no two alike. It is the planet's gentle reminder that even within sameness, there is infinite variation. The test is not about copying answers, but about shaping your own. Breathe in, and remember, you carry the ocean inside you. The salt in your blood matches the sea. Your heart beats like waves. When you cry, you release drops that mirror the rain. The exam has written its questions into your very being, so that even if you never saw the ocean, you would still hold its memory. Scientists still argue about the origin of Earth's water. Some say it came from icy comets, delivered in countless impacts. Others believe it bubbled out from deep within the mantle, released in the planet's early days. The debate remains open. But whichever is true, water arrived and stayed, pooling into oceans, shaping climate, inviting life. It is as though the test paper was handed to you already damp with ink, already prepared for answers. So tonight, as you lie still, imagine waves curling endlessly onto shore. Imagine rain tapping against glass, rivers winding through valleys, glaciers sliding in patient silence. Every movement of water is a reminder. The exam is not fixed. It flows, recycles, shifts form, and demands that you do the same. And just as every drop eventually returns to the sea, every moment you live returns to the larger cycle, part of a pattern too vast to see. The waters bind you to earth, to the past, to one another. They are the test's most constant question, whispered again and again. When the tides rise and fall, how will you answer? The water drifts back into the background, and now you turn your face upward toward the sky. The ceiling of the exam hall is not a flat roof, but a dome of blue that shifts into black, punctuated with light. Above you burn the guardians of this fragile test: the sun, the magnetic field, the planets that circle in their paths. Each plays a role in keeping your desk stable, your paper legible, your ink from being erased. Without them, you could not even sit for the exam. Start with the sun, the great furnace that keeps you alive. Stars are not all so steady. Some flare wildly, blasting out radiation that would scorch nearby worlds. Others flicker and fade, unstable and short-lived. But your sun has burned with remarkable consistency for over 4 billion years, delivering just enough heat, just enough light to sustain life. Scientists still argue whether such stability is common among stars of its class, or whether you are lucky to orbit a rare exception. Imagine if the sun were a teacher, strict but reliable, keeping the lights on so you can see your test paper. No sudden blackouts, no wild surges of fire across your desk, just a steady illumination, long enough for billions of years of students to write their answers. The sun, however, is not gentle in every way. It spits streams of charged particles into space, the solar wind. Without protection, those winds would strip away your atmosphere, evaporate your seas, and sterilize your ground. This is where another guardian steps in: Earth's magnetic field. Generated by molten iron churning deep within, it creates an invisible shield that bends the solar wind away, letting life continue. You might think of it as the exam proctor's hand cupped around your page, keeping stray gusts from scattering your work. Without it, you could not even begin to answer. And then there is Jupiter, the giant standing far across the solar system. It is vast enough to swallow all the other planets combined, and its gravity acts like a shield. Comets and asteroids, those stray missiles of the cosmos, are often captured or deflected by Jupiter's pull. Many scientists believe that without it, Earth would have faced constant bombardment, too unstable for complex life to ever emerge. You can picture Jupiter as a guardian at the doorway of the classroom, catching or swatting away dangerous objects before they reach your desk. Yet not all are stopped. Some slip past, like the one that ended the age of dinosaurs. The guardians keep you safe enough to write, but never so safe that the exam is easy. Look closer at the sky, and you find more protectors. The ozone layer in your atmosphere blocks harmful ultraviolet light, while still letting warmth and visible colors through. Without ozone, every step outside would be a dangerous exposure, yet even this guardian is fragile. In recent decades, humans themselves thinned the ozone with industrial chemicals, only to later learn to repair it. The test, it seems, is not only about surviving conditions, but about how you handle the guardians entrusted to you. Will you protect them in return, or neglect them until they falter? History remembers these guardians too. Ancient peoples worshipped the sun as a god. Ra in Egypt, Helios in Greece, Amaterasu in Japan. They knew their crops, their warmth, their very existence came from that fiery disk, but they also feared it. Droughts, scorching summers, failed harvests, all were read as signs of displeasure. The guardians were never seen as neutral. They were demanding examiners, measuring obedience, gratitude, or humility. Here's a quirky tidbit to ponder. In the 17th century, Galileo sketched sunspots, those dark blemishes on the sun's face, and was accused by some of insulting perfection. People were uneasy with the idea that the sun was not flawless, yet those spots were real, part of an 11-year cycle of solar activity, sometimes affecting climate and even human history. It's as if the teacher occasionally scrawled reminders on the corner of the exam, letting you know the conditions could shift. You breathe deeper and think of auroras, shimmering lights at the poles where the solar wind meets the magnetic field. They are the most visible proof of your guardians at work, glowing curtains of green and red across the sky. Imagine being an ancient traveler and seeing them for the first time. Would you not have thought them signs, messages written in light? Even now, people gather under auroras in silence, feeling that the guardians are whispering something beyond language. But remember, the guardians are not invincible. Extinction events prove this. The impact that ended the dinosaurs was a reminder that Jupiter's defense is not absolute. Solar storms can still batter satellites and power grids. The ozone can still be weakened. The test never allows perfect safety, because safety without challenge would be no test at all. The examiners seem to have set the conditions so that you are protected enough to live, but still pushed to adapt. Scientists still argue about whether this layering of guardians is coincidence or necessity. Was Earth lucky to have them all aligned? A steady sun, a magnetic shield, a gas giant protector, an atmosphere tuned like a filter. Or is this what life anywhere must have, meaning you are not unique, but simply one of many students in many exam halls? The debate remains unresolved, and perhaps that uncertainty is itself part of the test. You recall another historical fact. In 1859, the Carrington event, a massive solar storm, struck Earth. Telegraph wires sparked, some even caught fire, and auroras glowed as far south as the Caribbean. If such an event happened today, it could cripple modern technology. The guardians allow you to thrive most of the time, but occasionally they remind you of their power. The exam proctor does not always sit silently. Sometimes they rap the desk, startling you awake. As you lie there now, think of how delicately the guardians hold the balance. Without the sun, no warmth. Without the magnetic field, no shield. Without Jupiter, too many impacts. Without the ozone, too much radiation. Each one is a line of defense, a parameter carefully set. And yet, each one also demands your awareness. You are not only a student in this test, you are a custodian, responsible for whether the guardians remain intact. Breathe again, slowly. The sky above you is not empty. It is layered with protections, filters, shields, and silent sentinels. They keep you safe enough to write your answers, but never so safe that the test is meaningless. The guardians of the sky are both gift and reminder. You are being measured not in comfort, but in how you endure within fragile safety. So when you next see the sun rise, or the moon glow, or the aurora dance, think of them as the watchful figures in the exam hall, ensuring you can keep writing a little longer. The test continues, and the guardians hold the roof above your head. The guardians above fade into the background, and now your steps carry you into the deeper corridors of history, where you begin to hear the echoes of the first great trials. Earth has not been a gentle classroom. Time and again, it has slammed the desk, torn up the pages, and forced life to start over. These are the mass extinctions, the first trials written in fire and ice, silence and shadow. To call Earth a test is to acknowledge that entire species, entire ages, have been erased from the page. And yet, strangely, each erasure made space for something new. Close your eyes and travel backward hundreds of millions of years. Picture the seas swarming with trilobites, armored creatures scuttling across the ocean floor. They thrived for nearly 270 million years, longer than mammals have even existed. Then came the Permian extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying. Over 90% of marine species vanished, along with the majority of life on land. It was as if the examiners had swept the page almost clean, leaving only a few scribbles to survive. Scientists still argue about what exactly caused it: massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, methane releases from the ocean floor, or perhaps a deadly combination. The mystery remains, one of history's hardest questions. Yet even this annihilation was not the end. Life clawed its way back. Out of the silence rose new forms, reptiles that would one day become dinosaurs, mammals that would bide their time. The test, it seemed, was not designed for permanence but for resilience. When one answer failed, another was invited to try. Think too of the Cretaceous extinction. 66 million years ago, the one children know by heart. Dinosaurs reigned supreme, filling every niche of Earth. Then in a single moment, a rock from the sky erased their dominance. The impact near what is now Chicxulub, Mexico, hurled dust and ash into the sky, blocked the sun, and plunged Earth into a long winter. Forests burned, Oceans acidified and giants fell, but in the shadows small mammals survived, scurrying, hiding, enduring. From them eventually came you. Out of disaster, new possibility. Out of failure, a new version of the test. A quirky tidbit lingers in your thoughts. Some scientists suggest that if the asteroid had struck a few minutes earlier or later, it might have landed in the deep ocean, rather than the Yucatan Peninsula. The splash would have been catastrophic, yes, but perhaps not extinction level. Dinosaurs might still roam Earth today, and humanity might never have had its chance. A matter of minutes, like a trick question whose answer hinges on a single word. That is how finely tuned the exam can be. Not all trials were sudden impacts. Some stretched across millions of years. Ice ages descended, locking continents in cold, forcing species to migrate or vanish. Oxygen levels rose and fell, reshaping what creatures could breathe. Forests spread and burned. Each shift was another exam question. Can you adapt? Can you endure? History remembers echoes of these trials. Ancient myths often speak of floods, fires, or long winters. Cultural memories of disasters passed down. The Norse told of Ragnarök, a fiery end followed by rebirth. The Greeks spoke of cataclysms that reset humanity. The Bible describes a flood that wiped the slate clean. Scientists still argue whether these myths were inspired by real localized disasters or whether they are archetypal, the mind's way of grappling with the reality that the ground beneath us is never guaranteed. Picture yourself standing on the edge of an ancient shoreline, watching strange creatures vanish, seas retreat, forests die. The silence that follows is the sound of a test resetting. It can feel cruel, almost merciless. But then you notice tiny survivors, ferns pushing through ash, small mammals nibbling in the dark, fish hiding in shallow pools. Life endures. The examiners seem to care less about the grandeur of rulers and more about the quiet persistence of survivors. And this truth is not only biological. Civilizations, too, have faced their own extinctions. The Maya, who carved temples into the jungle, the Akkadians, who ruled Mesopotamia, the once thriving cultures of Easter Island. Each rose, flourished, and fell, leaving behind ruins and lessons, droughts, wars, diseases, overuse of resources. Their trials mirrored those written in Earth's stone. The same pattern: growth, collapse, renewal. The exam repeats its format across scales, from bacteria to empires. Consider the fossil record itself. It is like an archive of past exam answers. Layers of rock hold imprints of shells, leaves, bones. Some pages are smeared with sudden endings. Others show gradual changes. Paleontologists, chiseling fossils from stone, are like students trying to read the red marks left by the examiner. What went wrong here? What answer proved unsatisfactory? And what lesson was carried forward into the next attempt? Breathe in and imagine that every extinction is not only a loss, but also a preparation. The Permian cleared space for dinosaurs. The Cretaceous cleared space for mammals. Each failure set the stage for a new beginning. The test is relentless, but it is also strangely hopeful. It says you may fall, but another will rise. You may be erased, but the story will continue. Scientists still argue whether humanity itself faces such a trial. Will climate change, nuclear risk, or pandemics write the next chapter of erasure? Or will ingenuity allow you to adapt, bending the curve of history towards survival? The open debate is unsettling, but it also keeps you alert. Perhaps the examiner does not allow you to know whether your generation's trial will be decisive. You must answer without seeing the grading rubric. As you lie here, the echoes of the first trials surround you. The fossils buried in stone, the craters hidden under forests, the scars on the seafloor. They are reminders that the exam has been running for billions of years. You are not the first student, and you will not be the last. So breathe again. The first trials may seem harsh, but they were also the foundation. Without them, Without those resets, without those massive failures, the chain of life would never have led to you. The exam is not about avoiding collapse, but about what emerges afterward. And tonight, as you listen, you realize even extinction is part of the test's strange patient design. You lie quietly now, breathing, and in the silence you feel something peculiar, as though unseen eyes are resting on you. The thought curls around your imagination. What if you are not alone in this classroom? What if, while you sit at your desk scribbling answers, there are watchers? Maybe they never speak, maybe they never intervene, but their gaze shapes the exam just as much as the questions themselves. From the earliest days of civilization, humans sensed these observers. Priests stood under the stars, declaring that God saw everything. The eyes of heaven, they said, were watching every deed, weighing every choice. You can almost feel the comfort and the terror in that idea. If you are seen, your answers matter more, but if you are seen, your mistakes echo louder too. The invisible eyes turn every action into part of the record. Even in secular times, the notion lingers. Some imagine extraterrestrials, far more advanced than you, peering in from afar like teachers behind a glass wall. Others whisper about simulations, future beings running models of their ancestors to see how they behaved, and some still hold fast to spiritual beliefs, divine beings, angels, ancestors watching with quiet patience. Scientists still argue whether consciousness itself could be universal, shared, or somehow interconnected, making observation unavoidable. None of these ideas can be proven, yet the sense of being watched has never gone away. Think of ancient Egypt again. The people believed in Mat, the principle of truth and balance. At death, your heart was weighed against a feather. It was not enough that you survived. You were tested by how light your heart had become. The examiners were the gods themselves, unseen until the very end. A quirky reminder, Egyptian tombs were often painted with eyes, Udjat symbols, so that even the walls would watch you. That is how deeply observation was woven into their world. Imagine lying in bed, knowing your every word, every gesture, every kindness or cruelty might be recorded. You might behave differently. You might resist the urge to snap at a stranger, might give more freely, might hold your tongue. Psychologists today call this the observer effect. People act differently when they believe they are being watched. The exam seems to take advantage of that. You never know for sure if you're alone, and that uncertainty may be the very tool that measures you. There's a modern echo of this too. Surveillance cameras on street corners, satellites circling overhead, data logs recording your clicks and swipes. In a way, humanity has built its own layer of observers, digital examiners archiving choices. The test is no longer imagined. It is coded in servers, mirrored in glass lenses. But is that the real test, or just another reflection of a deeper truth, that nothing is ever fully unseen? Scientists still argue whether the universe itself is observer-dependent. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently when observed. Does that mean reality itself is shaped by watching? If so, then the idea of unseen observers is not superstition but physics. Imagine your every action collapsing probabilities into reality, each choice amplified because it was seen. Perhaps the examiners don't need to be gods or aliens. Perhaps the universe itself is the observer. Think of history again. The Greek philosopher Plato described a cave where people saw only shadows on the wall, never the true forms behind them. It was an allegory of limited perception, of being watched while watching only fragments. What if you are the shadow in that cave, observed by something larger, never able to see the eyes staring back? The idea shivers through you, both humbling and oddly reassuring. Here's another quirky thread. Medieval monks used to illuminate manuscripts with a tiny drawing of an eye, a watching eye of God, tucked in the margins. A reminder to the copyist that even if no abbot was present, the divine still saw the work. The exam was never unwatched. Even in silence, someone, somewhere, was recording. And what about you? Do you live differently when you think no one is looking? That may be one of the exam's deepest questions, because if kindness is only performed for an audience, is it true? If honesty only appears under scrutiny, is it real? The uncertainty of observation forces you to decide whether you act from principle or from fear of being caught. That decision, the raw truth of motive, may be the heart of the test. Breathe again. The idea of unseen observers does not need to frighten you. It can also comfort you. If you are watched, then you are not alone. Your struggles are witnessed. Your small victories are recorded. The quiet moment when you resist anger, when you choose patience, when you give without asking, maybe those are seen, cherished, preserved. The test becomes not only a trial but a story told to someone beyond yourself. Scientists still argue whether humanity is unique or whether countless civilizations exist across the cosmos. Some believe alien eyes already watch us, waiting to see if we pass a test of maturity before revealing themselves. Others believe we are alone, the sole students in a silent classroom. Both possibilities are staggering. If we are alone, then every answer we write is the only one in the universe. If we are observed, then our test is part of something much larger. So you lie still, feeling those unseen eyes. They may be gods, they may be physics, they may be nothing at all, but the sensation shapes you regardless. You are more careful, more thoughtful, more aware. The exam seems to whisper, behave as if you are watched, even if you are not, because in the end, you might be. And perhaps that is the deeper purpose. The observers may never intervene, never correct your answers, never hand back the test with marks. Their role is simply to witness, and sometimes being seen is enough to change everything. So breathe once more, slow and steady. Imagine eyes in the stars, in the soil, in the very atoms around you. Imagine that your life is not unfolding in secret, but as part of a story that is being read, even now, by someone unseen. The exam continues, and the observers take their quiet notes. You exhale softly, and the feeling of being watched lingers, but it shifts now into something subtler. The awareness that simply believing you are seen changes the way you act. This is the observer's effect, the strange truth that the very act of observation reshapes behavior. It is as though the test itself is not static but alive, bending the questions as soon as you notice them. You imagine walking into a room filled with mirrors. Every step you take is doubled, every gesture reflected back at you. You become self-conscious, more deliberate, less careless. That is what it feels like to live under observation. You are still yourself, but you're self-adjusted, calibrated to the awareness of eyes upon you. This is not merely psychology, it is physics too. Scientists still argue over the peculiar fact that at the quantum level, particles behave differently when measured, as though the universe itself prefers to remain unexamined. Does this mean the world shifts the moment you look at it? If so, then every act of attention, your own or another's, is part of the test's design. You turn the thought inward. How many of your own choices change because you suspect someone is watching? Think about kindness performed in public versus kindness performed in secret. A coin given to a beggar feels different when others see it. A comforting word whispered when no one is there to applaud feels truer, perhaps. The test seems to ask, is your goodness dependent on an audience, or does it emerge even in solitude? History gives you echoes of this truth. In ancient China, the philosopher Junzi wrote that ritual and propriety mattered because they shaped behavior. They were like unseen eyes guiding action. He believed people needed structure to bring out virtue, even if they thought no gods were watching. Compare this to medieval Europe, where churches painted murals of the Last Judgment, filling ceilings with angels and demons, so that every worshipper would feel eyes above them. Two very different approaches, but the same outcome: behavior reshaped by the belief that someone somewhere was keeping score. A quirky little fact weaves in here. In 2012, a group of psychologists placed posters of staring eyes above a university coffee station, where students paid on the honor system. Contributions increased dramatically. Just the illusion of eyes was enough to change honesty. No gods, no cameras, only ink and paper. Yet still, people behaved differently. The observer's effect was triggered by nothing more than the suggestion of sight. Now imagine that scaled to the universe. What if the test is not only about what you do, but about how you change when you think you are seen? Perhaps the examiners are not interested in actions alone, but in the difference between your secret self and your observed self. Do you rise to higher choices under the gaze, or do you falter? The exam is more intricate than you first thought. You glance again towards science. Quantum theory's mysteries remain unsettled. Does the wave of probability collapse because it is measured, or because it is entangled with something else? Some physicists argue that observation doesn't require consciousness, only interaction. Others insist that mind plays a role, that reality itself is participatory. The debate continues, unresolved, but the idea lingers: being seen, whether by machines or by minds, reshapes what exists. The exam conditions are mutable, shifting with every glance. Think also of art, performance, and storytelling. A play performed without an audience feels incomplete. The presence of observers changes the energy, the intensity, even the choices of the actors. Life itself may be like that. You are the performer, and you behave differently because you feel someone in the seats, even if you cannot see them. And so the test is twofold: how you act when watched, and how you act when you believe you are not. There is another layer here. What if observation is selective? Maybe you are not watched in every breath, but only at certain crossroads. Just as a teacher does not hover for every pencil stroke, but looks closely when an exam answer reveals deeper reasoning. Perhaps the observers choose moments to watch more intently. Scientists still argue whether evolution itself may contain critical points, where slight pressures like observers leaning in determine outcomes. Maybe history pivots not on every step, but on key decisions when the gaze is heaviest. Picture an ancient battlefield. Soldiers fight, mud and blood mingling, while kings or generals watch from a distance. The presence of those eyes, whether divine, royal, or ancestral, changes the soldier's courage. Would he fight differently if he thought no one was watching? Would you? The test asks not only what you do, but how observation shapes your resolve. And yet, here lies a paradox. If you know you are being observed, can you ever act freely? The exam may measure not only your choices, but your awareness of the gaze itself. Do you resent it, rebel against it, or accept it as part of the test? Imagine a student who knows the teacher is watching every answer. Does the student perform for approval, or write truthfully regardless? The observer's effect is not only about behavior, it is about authenticity. There is comfort here too. If you are observed, your struggles matter. Your loneliness is witnessed. Your triumphs, even small ones, are noted. The universe may not cheer, but it may be recording, and sometimes being recorded is enough. It means the test is not taken in vain. Here's a peculiar reminder. Indigenous Australians once described the emu in the sky, a constellation formed not from stars, but from the dark gaps in the Milky Way. It was as though the watchers were not the lights, but the spaces in between, the unseen eyes you could feel but not trace. The idea is haunting. The examiners may be present not in what you notice, but in what you overlook. So you lie here, letting the thoughts settle. Observation is not a static rule, but a shifting condition. Sometimes you are watched closely, sometimes only lightly, sometimes not at all, but the effect lingers regardless. You act differently, you feel differently, because you might be seen, and perhaps that is the true question of this section of the test. How does uncertainty shape you? Scientists still argue whether the universe itself cares, or whether the observer's effect is simply a side effect of physics. But you cannot deny its power in your own life. Whether through gods, cameras, ancestors, or quantum mechanics, the gaze is present. And the test seems to whisper, behave as though you are seen even when you are not, because in some way you always are. Breathe deeply now. Imagine your desk, your paper, your pen. Imagine that unseen eyes rest gently on your work, not to judge harshly, but to notice. Every line you write is acknowledged. Every erasure is remembered. Every answer, even the messy ones, is observed. The exam continues, shaped by the invisible gaze. The gaze fades, but what it left behind lingers. You realize now that life on Earth is not taken alone, not written in isolation. Civilization itself is the classroom you find yourself in, crowded, noisy, filled with distractions and competition. You look around and see thousands of other desks beside yours, other students scribbling answers, sometimes cooperating, sometimes cheating, sometimes tearing each other's papers. If the planet is a test, then civilization is the group project, the part where you cannot succeed or fail entirely on your own. Think about the first cities: Uruk, Jericho, Mohenjo-daro. Their walls rose as symbols of organization, their streets filled with traders and artisans. Living together demanded rules, laws, currencies, rituals. Suddenly, survival was not just about hunting or gathering, but about managing relationships, dividing resources, keeping peace. The exam had grown more complex. It was no longer just about enduring storms or finding food. It was about thriving in groups, balancing selfish needs against communal survival. Scientists still argue whether agriculture was humanity's greatest achievement or its greatest trap, a step that gave stability but also hierarchy, inequality, and endless labor. Either way, it was a new test format. The essay became collaborative. Now picture a medieval marketplace. Merchants shout, spices mingle in the air, coins clink from hand to hand. Every transaction is a tiny answer written on the page of civilization. Will you trade fairly or cheat? Will you share wealth or hoard it? The test is not about survival alone, but about fairness, trust, and cooperation. And history shows both sides of the ledger. There were flourishing trade routes like the Silk Road, linking east and west with goods and ideas, and there were collapses, like the Great Depression centuries later, when greed and imbalance rippled through entire nations. A quirky fact surfaces here in the 18th century. Dutch tulips became so desired that bulbs sold for more than the price of a house. When the bubble burst, fortunes vanished. It was one of history's first great economic collapses, born not from drought or plague, but from human desire itself. The exam had expanded into realms of psychology and temptation, testing not just survival but restraint. Civilization raises the stakes. In crowded cities, your actions affect countless others. A lie can start wars. A single invention can change millions of lives. Think of Johannes Gutenberg, who printed the first mass-produced Bible in the 15th century. With one machine, the flow of knowledge shifted forever. Literacy spread, revolutions followed, and the exam questions became more difficult. When knowledge is free, will you use it for wisdom or for conflict? Scientists still argue whether technology inevitably lifts humanity forward or whether it introduces new risks with every leap. You breathe, imagining yourself walking through history's great halls. The Roman Forum, where politicians debated laws that shaped empires. The Great Wall of China, stretching across mountains as both defense and symbol. The bustling streets of Baghdad's Golden Age, where scholars translated ancient texts and preserved wisdom. Each place feels like a classroom within the greater exam hall, each testing not only individuals but groups. And with civilization came hierarchy. Kings, emperors, generals, presidents. Leadership itself is a question on the test. How do you wield power? Do you use it to serve or to dominate? History is filled with both answers. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, writing meditations on virtue, even as he ruled. Nero, who burned and indulged while Rome suffered. Civilization's group project shows clearly that the test is not only about conditions, but about choices. But the exam is not fair. It never has been. Geography favored some, cursed others. River valleys like the Nile and the Tigris nurtured prosperity. Deserts and mountains often isolated and starved. Civilizations rose and fell based not only on brilliance or virtue, but on the accidents of soil, climate, and timing. This unfairness is itself part of the test. You are not all given the same paper. Some receive questions easier, some harder. The examiner seems more interested in how you respond to your version than whether all papers are equal. Think of disease, sweeping through cities as civilization grew denser. The Black Death in the 14th century killed nearly half of Europe's population. Families shattered, entire towns emptied. Yet in the aftermath, new structures emerged. Wages rose, feudal systems weakened, medical inquiry deepened. Civilization stumbled but adapted. Again, the test revealed itself. Pressure applied, answers revealed, resilience measured. A quirky image drifts in. In some medieval towns, it was believed that ringing church bells could drive away plague, the vibrations scattering sickness. It didn't work, of course, but the attempt itself shows something true. Humans will always try to answer, even when the question is unclear. And sometimes, the attempt becomes as meaningful as the outcome. Now think of modern civilization. Your test papers are not clay tablets or parchment scrolls, but digital signals, glowing screens, invisible networks. You are connected to billions, your actions echoing across continents in an instant. A word typed in anger can spiral into conflict. A kindness shared can ripple farther than you ever see. The classroom has never been more crowded, the exam more complicated. Scientists still argue whether such interconnectedness will unify humanity or fracture it beyond repair. The uncertainty is the test itself. Civilization demands cooperation, but it also amplifies conflict. You see this in every age. Great cities rise, but so do wars. Knowledge spreads, but so does misinformation. The examiners seem to be watching not only what you build, but how long it lasts, and whether you can sustain it without collapsing under your own weight. You let your breath deepen, and remember, civilization is not separate from nature's test, but an extension of it. Just as tectonics shift and oceans rise, civilizations rise and fall. Just as extinctions clear the slate for new life, collapses clear the stage for new societies. The exam repeats itself, endlessly, with new students filling the desks. So here you are, in a city of your own age, part of the ongoing group project. The test you take is not written alone, it is written together, in shared streets, shared systems, shared struggles, and the question it poses is both ancient and immediate. When you live in a crowd, will you compete until all is lost, or will you cooperate until something greater is built? The classroom hums around you, and you add your own answer with every small action, every interaction, every choice to give or to take. Civilization is not just a backdrop. It is one of the exam's most demanding sections, harder than the guardians above or the waters that bind. It is the part of the test where you cannot succeed without thinking of the others sitting beside you. And perhaps that is the point. Civilization is the classroom, where the examiners discover not only what you will do for yourself, but what you will do for one another. The noise of civilization fades into a deeper hum, and in that hum you begin to hear something sharper, something that presses at the edges of your chest. It is suffering. Every test has stress points, and this one is no different. If Earth is an exam, then suffering is the part designed to push you hardest, to strip away comforts and reveal what lies beneath. No student escapes it. Some face hunger, others illness, others loss. Even the most fortunate encounter moments when life presses in too tightly, when the air itself feels heavy. And in those moments, the examiner seems to lean closer, not to punish, but to see what you will do. You think first of the most obvious forms: famine, disease, disaster. The Irish potato famine in the 19th century, when blight destroyed crops and 1 million people starved, entire families emigrated, scattering to other continents. It was not simply hunger, it was a reshaping of lives, cultures, and identities. Out of the suffering came both devastation and resilience. Communities built anew in foreign lands, traditions carried across oceans. Scientists still argue whether such famines are purely natural disasters or whether human decisions, neglect, greed, political blindness play the larger role. Either way, the suffering became a crucible. Then you think of disease. The Black Death in the 14th century killed tens of millions, reshaping Europe's population. But it also shifted society. Wages rose because workers were scarce, feudal systems weakened, and medicine, once bound to superstition, began to inch towards science. The suffering was immense, but the test measured not only who survived, but how the survivors rebuilt. Even in recent memory, pandemics press the same questions. Will you help one another, or retreat into isolation? Will fear divide, or will compassion grow? Here's a curious tidbit. During outbreaks of plague, some towns appointed watchmen whose job was to nail shut the doors of infected houses, trapping whole families inside. It was a desperate attempt at containment, but it reveals how suffering changes not only individuals but systems. Rules rewritten, ethics bent, survival prioritized above mercy. The test is rarely clean. Suffering does not come only from nature. Humans create their own trials, often harsher than storms. Wars, oppression, injustice. These are self-inflicted sections of the exam. Think of World War II, cities bombed into rubble, families torn apart. Yet out of the suffering emerged acts of staggering courage. Ordinary people hid neighbors, resisted tyranny, shared their last scraps of food. Under pressure, true character appeared. Some chose cruelty, others chose compassion. The examiners must have leaned close in those years, watching how far kindness could reach in the darkest halls. And suffering is not only collective, it comes in personal forms too. The death of someone you love, an illness that will not heal, the loneliness that presses even in crowded rooms. These private sufferings are quieter, but no less real. They measure resilience in ways no empire's rise or fall can match. Sometimes the most difficult questions on the test are the ones you face alone, with no one else to see your answer. You pause and breathe, remembering that suffering also sparks invention. After earthquakes, cities are rebuilt with stronger walls. After fires, safety codes emerge. After wars, treaties are signed, philosophies reshaped, peace movements born. The exam does not allow suffering without consequence. Every pain is a mark on the page, and though it scars, it also instructs. Scientists still argue about suffering's role in evolution itself. Some say mass extinctions are cruel but necessary resets, clearing the stage for new diversity. Others see them as accidents, tragic interruptions in life's potential. Either way, survival has always depended on adaptation to hardship. Life thrives not because it avoids pain, but because it responds to it. Think of historical figures who endured suffering and left wisdom as their answer. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, emerged not with vengeance but with reconciliation. Helen Keller, both blind and deaf, learned to communicate and inspired millions. Viktor Frankl, surviving a concentration camp, wrote that meaning could be found even in despair. These were not abstract theories. They were answers scratched into the harshest test papers, proofs that character can grow even in ash. Here's another quirky piece of history in ancient Rome. Some gladiators volunteered for combat even when they were free, seeking glory in the arena despite the suffering it brought. To them, pain was not only something to endure, but something to transform into meaning, into spectacle. Strange, perhaps, but it shows again how suffering is not only endured, it is interpreted. But suffering can also corrupt. The same stress that reveals compassion can reveal cruelty. History remembers the Inquisition, when fear and dogma led to torture in the name of faith. It remembers genocides, where suffering turned to hatred, multiplying itself. The exam does not guarantee noble answers. It only guarantees pressure, and under pressure, every answer is amplified. Now think about your own life. The small hardships you've endured, disappointments, failures, rejections. At the time, they felt crushing. Yet looking back, perhaps they shaped you, redirected you, made you more patient, more resilient. Maybe they stripped away illusions or forced you to grow in ways you would never have chosen. The exam whispers, "It is not enough to write when the room is calm. Write when the lights flicker, when the air is cold, when the ink runs thin." Suffering, in this sense, becomes the most intimate section of the test. It cannot be predicted. It cannot be controlled. It arrives unannounced and demands your answer immediately. And though you cannot always choose what happens, you can choose how you respond. That is the mark the examiners are looking for. Not whether you avoided suffering, but whether you let it hollow you or strengthen you. Scientists still argue whether meaning itself is a human invention, a coping strategy to soften suffering, or whether it is a real thread woven into existence. Perhaps the examiners do not care which answer you choose, only that you search for one. So breathe again. The truth of suffering is that it belongs to everyone. No student is spared, but within it lies the possibility of answers more profound than comfort ever could produce. The exam is not cruel for cruelty's sake. It is sharp because sharpness reveals what soft paper cannot. And tonight, as you lie here, you realize something. Suffering is not the whole test. It is only a section, one among many, but it may be the section that matters most. The one where your deepest answers are written in the ink of endurance, compassion, and quiet strength. The shadows of suffering begin to ease, and what emerges now is the long view, the realization that life and civilization are never still, that they move in patterns, rising and falling like the breath in your chest. Cycles within cycles, endlessly repeating. If Earth is a test, then these cycles are not mistakes. They are intentional, written into the very structure of the exam, like questions that reappear in different forms until you finally grasp their meaning. You look back first at the biological cycles, the grand sweep of life itself. 5 great extinctions already mark Earth's record, each one erasing what came before, each one clearing the board for something new. Trilobites vanished, dinosaurs fell, mammoths faded. Yet in every silence, new voices rose, coral reefs rebuilt, birds filled skies once ruled by pterosaurs, mammals crept from the shadows into sunlight. The examiners never end the test completely. They simply turn the page, write a new version, and wait to see what answers will come. Scientists still argue whether extinctions are purely random catastrophes, or whether they follow patterns woven into Earth's systems, like rhythms in a song. Civilizations mirror this biological truth. The Sumerians carved writing into clay and built ziggurats, only for their empire to fragment. The Romans stretched roads across continents, only to crumble under their own weight. The Khmer raised Angkor Wat from jungle stone, only to abandon it centuries later. Each rise carries within it the seed of collapse, and each collapse leaves lessons for what comes next. You realize that this cycle is not failure, it is repetition, a chance to try again. History gives you endless examples. After the fall of Rome, Europe entered centuries of fragmentation, but monasteries preserved knowledge, planting seeds for the Renaissance. After the Mongols swept across Asia, terror followed, but also a surge of trade along the Silk Road. After the devastation of World War II, nations rebuilt, forming institutions for cooperation that had never existed before. The examiners seem to favor this rhythm, destruction paired with renewal, hardship paired with growth. A quirky fact comes to mind. The ancient Mayans tracked not only the movement of stars, but also long cycles of history. Their long count calendar stretched for thousands of years, ending and beginning in great epochs. For them, collapse was not an end but a transition, the turning of a cosmic page. In their worldview, the test was never failed, only restarted. And though their civilization itself eventually declined, their way of seeing the world echoed the truth of cycles. Now bring the lens closer. Even within a single life, the same cycles exist. Childhood, adolescence, adulthood, old age, times of growth, times of loss, times of renewal. Friendships fade and are replaced by new ones. Careers collapse and shift into unexpected paths. Love ends, but another begins. Each stage feels final while you are in it, yet each one gives way to something else. The exam repeats the question in gentler forms, asking, will you endure change? Will you learn from endings or fear them? Scientists still argue whether time itself is linear or cyclical. Some say the universe began with a bang and will end in heat death. Others suggest it may collapse back into itself and begin again, an endless cycle of expansion and contraction. If so, then even the cosmos is taking the test in recurring rounds, failing and restarting eternally. You breathe and think of the rise and fall of ecosystems. Forests grow, burn, and regrow. Coral reefs bleach, crumble, and slowly return. Grasslands are grazed by herds, restored by rains, then grazed again. Fire, flood, drought, renewal. The test repeats its lessons again and again across scales and centuries, as if repetition is the only way to reveal truth. But cycles are not only external, they shape human hearts too. You know the rhythm of joy followed by sorrow, of energy followed by exhaustion. Even in your own emotions you rise and fall, sometimes daily, sometimes across years, and perhaps that is part of the design. The examiners do not ask for constant happiness or endless strength. They ask how you navigate the cycles, how you carry wisdom from one stage into the next. History offers small echoes of this resilience. Consider Japan after the 2011 tsunami. Entire towns were erased by water, but survivors rebuilt and traditions of community care deepened. Or think of London after the Great Fire of 1666. The blaze destroyed much of the city, but afterwards safer building codes and wider streets were created. Collapse was painful, but renewal followed. The examiners seem to always allow space for rebuilding, as if the test is designed to measure endurance rather than perfection. Here's another curious reminder. Medieval alchemists believed that death itself was part of a cycle leading to transformation. Solve et coagula, they wrote. Dissolve and recombine. Though they sought literal gold, what they described was also metaphorical destruction and renewal, endlessly paired. It is strange how human intuition often sensed what science later confirmed, that nothing in nature is truly lost, only reshaped. But cycles carry warning as well. Just as civilizations rise and fall, so can mistakes. Violence repeats, greed repeats, war repeats. The test does not automatically teach. It offers the same questions again, hoping for better answers. Sometimes humanity writes the same errors over and over, as if refusing to learn. The danger is not collapse itself, but failing to grow from it. Scientists still argue whether humans are doomed to repeat cycles endlessly, or whether progress is real, whether learning accumulates enough to break free of old mistakes. Perhaps the examiners are watching for that very point, the moment when a civilization not only rises again but rises differently, avoiding the traps of the past. You lie still now, realizing that the cycles are both terrifying and beautiful. They mean nothing lasts forever. No comfort, no suffering, no empire, no star, but they also mean nothing is final. Every ending is also a beginning. Every collapse a chance to rebuild. The test is not a straight line, but a spiral. Each turn looks familiar, yet each carries you higher, offering a chance to write a better answer. So breathe deeply. Let the rhythm of your breath remind you. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, rise, fall, rise, fall. You are part of the same pattern, bound to the same cycles, and the exam continues, asking always the same question in different guises. Will you endure the turning, and will you find meaning in its repetition? The spiral of cycles steadies, and out of that rhythm comes a sharper awareness. The test is not only about enduring and rebuilding, it is also about choice, about morality. Every civilization, every individual life eventually arrives at questions that cannot be answered with survival alone. These are the moral dilemmas, the crossroads where right and wrong blur, where the examiners seem to lean forward and ask not, "Can you live?" but, "How will you live?" You think of ancient codes, Hammurabi's stele, carved with laws nearly 4,000 years ago, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. For its time it was not cruelty but balance, a way of restraining vengeance by limiting it. The exam's moral question, then, was about fairness. How much punishment is too much? The Egyptians, by contrast, imagined the heart weighed against a feather. Morality for them was about truth, not vengeance. Scientists still argue whether morality is innate to human nature or whether it is written by culture, shifting with time and place. History offers endless examples. Consider the Nuremberg trials after World War II. For the first time, nations declared that following orders was not an excuse for atrocity. A new moral principle was etched into humanity's exam paper. Responsibility rests on each individual. The world was tested in the ashes of war, and this was the answer that emerged. Yet even that answer remains debated, fragile, unevenly applied. And morality extends beyond war and law. Think of slavery, once accepted by nearly every civilization. It took centuries of resistance, revolt, and reform to overturn it, though even now its echoes remain. In that struggle, the exam's question was unmistakable. Will you treat others as tools or as equals? The answers, written in blood and law alike, shaped nations. Here's a quirky reminder. In medieval Europe, people sometimes put animals on trial. A pig might be dressed in human clothes and brought before a judge for trampling crops. As absurd as it seems, these trials reflected a yearning for moral order, a desire to place responsibility somewhere, even onto creatures that could not possibly understand. The examiners must have smiled at that. Humans grappling clumsily with morality, trying to expand it to the entire world. But morality is never simple. It is full of contradictions. Ancient Athens praised democracy, yet excluded women, slaves, and foreigners from citizenship. America's founding fathers wrote of liberty, yet many owned slaves. The exam's moral dilemmas often arrive tangled with no clear right answer, and perhaps that is intentional. The test is not multiple choice. It is an essay, messy, contradictory, demanding thought. Scientists still argue whether morality is universal, whether compassion, fairness, and justice are hardwired into all humans, or whether it is culturally relative, changing with circumstance. Evolutionary biologists point to altruism in animals, wolves sharing food, dolphins helping the injured, primates grooming one another. Maybe morality is not a human invention at all, but a deeper law of life itself. You imagine yourself at one of those crossroads. A stranger drops a coin. Do you return it or keep it? That is small, but imagine greater stakes. A famine comes. You have food enough for your family but not for your neighbors. Do you share? A war breaks out. You are ordered to harm the innocent. Do you obey? These are the exam's moral dilemmas, questions that cut deeper than survival. And morality evolves. Today, new dilemmas rise from technology. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, climate change. Should you alter the code of life itself? Should you create machines that think? Should you consume the Earth's resources when future generations will pay the price? The exam never stops asking. It only changes the phrasing of the questions. History shows that answers shift with time. Once, burning witches seemed moral to some. Now it is recognized as cruelty. Once, dueling to the death was seen as honorable. Now it is absurd. Morality is not fixed ink but wet clay, reshaped with every era. And yet, some truths seem to remain. Kindness is admired, cruelty condemned, generosity praised, greed despised. Perhaps those are the exam's constants, the questions that never change. Think of figures who wrestled with morality. Socrates, drinking hemlock rather than abandoning his principles. Gandhi, choosing non-violence even under oppression. Martin Luther King Jr., standing for justice despite threats and violence. Their answers still echo because they were written clearly against difficulty. The examiners, you imagine, noted those responses carefully. Here's another curious note. In Japan, the samurai followed Bushido, the way of the warrior. It emphasized loyalty, honor, and courage, but also compassion and sincerity. To die with honor was better than to live with shame. Yet elsewhere, like among Norse warriors, dying gloriously in battle was the highest honor. Two cultures, two moral codes, both deeply held. The test is never graded by one rubric alone. But morality is not only collective, it is personal. Every day you face small dilemmas, whether to speak the truth or stay silent, whether to forgive or to resent, whether to take the easy path or the right one. These small questions accumulate, line after line on the exam paper, until they shape your whole story. You lie here now, and the weight of it feels immense. What if every choice, no matter how small, is recorded? What if morality is not about grand acts, but about the little ones that slip past unnoticed? Returning the coin, offering the kind word, resisting the easy cruelty, these are the answers the examiners may value most. Scientists still argue whether morality has an ultimate source, divine command, evolutionary instinct, cultural agreement. Perhaps the examiners care less about the source and more about the result, how you treat one another in the brief time you share this test. So you breathe deeply and you understand morality is not a separate subject. It is woven through every part of the exam, in survival, in civilization, in suffering, in cycles. The real test is not whether you live, but whether you live well. And that question, whispered through history, is always before you. The weight of morality lingers in your thoughts, but now it bends into something stranger, the possibility that none of this is as it seems. If Earth is a test, perhaps it is not a simple classroom, but a simulation, a staged experiment, like an elaborate maze built for mice, with walls shifting to measure every turn. You begin to wonder, is this world, with its oceans and mountains, its laughter and sorrow, its wars and poems, a constructed environment designed to examine you? The idea is not new. Ancient philosophers already sensed the possibility. Plato imagined the cave, where people saw only shadows on a wall, mistaking them for reality. If you are in such a cave now, how would you know? Perhaps the test itself begins with this blindness, asking whether you will question the shadows or accept them as truth. Modern science circles the same idea with sharper tools. Some physicists speculate about the simulation hypothesis, the theory that advanced beings might have created this reality, running it like a vast program. Scientists still argue whether the laws of physics contain glitches, tiny signs that the universe is not fundamental but calculated. The speed of light, the Planck constant, the pixel-like granularity of space-time, are these the operating limits of a cosmic computer? If so, then the exam you take may not only measure your life, but the very capacity of consciousness inside an artificial frame. You imagine yourself sitting at a desk in a digital chamber, the walls painted with forests, oceans, skies. Everything you touch is convincing. The taste of water, the warmth of fire, the ache of loss. But all of it could be data, carefully programmed. The test, then, is not whether you believe in the illusion, but whether you act meaningfully inside it. Even if the walls are unreal, your answers are real. History offers echoes of this suspicion. In the Hindu tradition, the concept of Maya describes the world as an illusion, not unreal, but a veil over deeper truth. To live wisely is to pierce the veil, to glimpse what lies beyond. In Buddhism, too, existence is seen as impermanent and deceptive, a cycle of appearances hiding ultimate reality. The exam has always included this question: do you accept the surface, or do you seek the hidden? Here's a curious tidbit. In the 17th century, philosopher René Descartes doubted everything: his senses, his body, even the world itself. He imagined a demon tricking him into false perceptions. Only one truth seemed certain: I think, therefore I am. Even in a trick, the act of thought proved existence. His test paper contained a single answer: awareness itself. The examiners, if they watched, must have leaned in with interest. The simulation idea grows stranger when you consider free will. If this is a program, are your choices coded in advance, or are you truly writing your answers? Scientists still argue over determinism, whether every action follows inevitably from physics, or whether randomness, perhaps even consciousness, opens the door to freedom. If the examiners control the system, then free will may be the very question of the test. Can you act authentically even within limits? Think also of evolution, long seen as a natural process. But what if it is part of the program, a designed algorithm, guiding life through variation and selection? Every adaptation could be a programmed question, each extinction a system reset. When the dinosaurs fell, was it random chance, or was it the examiners adjusting parameters to see what mammals would do? A quirky story emerges from history. In the 19th century, mathematician Charles Babbage built the first designs for a mechanical computer. Later, he argued that miracles were not violations of natural law, but pre-programmed exceptions written into the system by God, much as a programmer inserts special instructions into a code. He imagined reality itself as a kind of machine. The test, in his view, was not broken by miracles, but expanded by them. You imagine again that your life is being run on some incomprehensible processor. The stars above are pixels, the oceans streams of data, the voices of loved ones vibrations encoded into simulation. And yet, the tears you shed are real, the comfort you give is real. Even in a constructed world, meaning persists. That may be the trickiest part of the exam, to live fully even if you suspect the walls are painted. But if this is a simulation, who are the examiners? Advanced civilizations, beings beyond comprehension, or perhaps even future humans, running ancestor simulations to study themselves? Some scientists suggest that if it is possible to simulate universes, then countless simulations exist, making it statistically more likely you are in one than not. Scientists still argue whether this is profound reasoning or a philosophical illusion. And yet, think of art. Every time you read a novel or watch a film, you step into a simulation created by another mind. You cry at characters who never lived, cheer for battles that never happened, fall in love with people who never existed. And yet those emotions are real. If smaller simulations already move you deeply, then why not a grander one? The exam may be asking not, is it real, but what do you do with it while it feels real? You let the thoughts sink deeper. If reality is a simulation, perhaps death is not an end, but a logout, a return to whatever lies beyond the program. Perhaps the exam does not end with erasure, but with awakening. A final bell rings and you step out of the classroom to face the true world beyond. What you wrote in this test may then determine what comes next. Here's another quirky note. In the 20th century, early video game designers sometimes left hidden messages inside their games, Easter eggs, small secrets for players to discover. What if the examiners did the same? What if déjà vu, coincidences, or the strange precision of mathematics are Easter eggs, clues hidden in the code to remind you that this is only a test? You breathe slowly, realizing that whether or not this is a simulation, the question remains the same: how will you live? Whether the mountains are stone or data, whether the rivers are water or code, the choice of kindness or cruelty, of creation or destruction, is still yours. The exam is designed to matter because you matter, even inside illusions. And so you lie back, imagining yourself both as a student and as a character in a grand simulation. The test does not demand certainty. It demands courage, the courage to act as though life is meaningful, even when you cannot prove the walls are real. The idea of simulation still glimmers in your mind, But now the exam grows even stranger. If Earth is a test, then perhaps its deepest questions are not about civilization, suffering, or morality alone. Perhaps the greatest questions are cosmic. What happens when you look upward beyond Earth into the stars? The heavens have always been the vast blackboard on which humanity sketches meaning, the grandest backdrop for the exam. And the question that lingers there, written in starlight, is simple. Are you alone, or are others taking the test too? Since the first humans gazed upward, the stars have carried mystery. To the Babylonians, they were gods writing fate. To the Greeks, constellations told stories. Orion, Perseus, Andromeda, heroes and monsters drawn across the sky. To sailors, they were navigation charts, guiding wooden ships across unknown seas. Yet beneath myth and utility, the same question pulsed. If Earth is one exam hall, how many others are there? Today, science seeks clearer answers. Astronomers have catalogued thousands of exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars. Some are gas giants, others rocky like Earth. A handful sit in the so-called habitable zone, where liquid water might exist. Scientists still argue whether life is likely on such worlds, or whether Earth is uniquely favored. If life emerges easily, then the galaxy must be crowded with test takers. If it is rare, then Earth may be the only exam room in a vast empty school. You imagine sitting in that quiet classroom, wondering if others are scribbling their answers nearby. Perhaps they are civilizations thousands of years ahead, already masters of their test, watching you as you stumble through yours. Or perhaps they failed, their papers blank, their voices gone before they ever reached the stars. The silence of the cosmos, what scientists call the Fermi paradox, is one of the exam's hardest questions. If so many planets exist, why has no one answered back? A quirky tidbit surfaces. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio recorded a strange 72-second signal from deep space, so unusual that the astronomer circled it on the printout and wrote one word, "Wow." It was never heard again, but for decades people have wondered if it was a cosmic whisper from another exam hall. If it was like a note slipped under the classroom door, tantalizing, fleeting, unanswered. History shows how longing for company in the cosmos shapes human imagination. In the 19th century, astronomers believed they saw canals on Mars, engineered waterways built by alien hands. It was an illusion, but it revealed the eagerness to believe that Earth is not alone. The test of loneliness is one of the hardest sections, not whether you can survive, but whether you can endure silence. And yet, silence may itself be the question. Perhaps the examiners want to see how you respond to apparent isolation. Do you despair, or do you keep reaching out? Do you let loneliness crush curiosity, or do you send probes, telescopes, radio waves into the void? The Voyager spacecraft, launched in the 1970s, still drifts outward, carrying golden records with sounds of Earth, greetings in many languages, songs, even the laughter of children, a message in a bottle floating through the cosmic ocean. It is humanity's way of saying, we are here, we are trying. Scientists still argue whether humanity should be broadcasting at all. Some say sending signals risks attracting dangerous civilizations. Others believe that if Earth is part of the exam, the real question is not safety but honesty. Will you hide, or will you announce yourself? Already, Earth glows with radio leakage, television signals, radar pulses, satellite transmissions. For a century, the planet has been humming like a student, whispering answers under their breath. If others are listening, they already know. You think also of myths that echo this longing. The Tower of Babel, where humans tried to reach heaven, only to be scattered in confusion. The myth of Icarus, flying too close to the sun with waxen wings. Both stories suggest that reaching upward is risky, but irresistible. The exam seems to encourage that risk, rewarding curiosity even when it burns. Here's another curious note. In 1961, astronomer Frank Drake created an equation to estimate how many civilizations might exist in the galaxy. It multiplied factors like the number of stars, the fraction with planets, the likelihood of life, the lifespan of civilizations. Each term was uncertain, but the act of writing it was profound. For the first time, humanity tried to quantify its cosmic classmates. The exam question was no longer myth, but mathematics. And yet, the silence remains. No messages, no visitors, no definitive proof. This could mean that Earth is the only student still in the hall, or that the examiners designed the test to include silence, to see how you behave without reassurance. Do you collapse in despair, or do you continue searching, writing your answers anyway? You breathe, staring upward in your mind's eye. The stars glitter like 1,000 watchful eyes, and you wonder, maybe the test is not about finding others, but about preparing yourself. If you cannot learn compassion, wisdom, and endurance here, how would you face another civilization out there? Perhaps the examiners are waiting until you are ready, until your answers prove you have passed the smaller sections. Even within your own lifetime, you have seen the reach for the stars intensify. Rockets pierce the atmosphere, satellites map the globe, rovers crawl across Martian soil. Each mission is both science and symbol, a hand raised in the cosmic classroom saying, "We are present, we are learning." Scientists still argue whether humanity should focus on colonizing space or repairing Earth. Both may be part of the test. Can you care for your home even as you seek new ones? Can you balance ambition with stewardship? These two are cosmic moral dilemmas. So you let your breath flow, in and out, as the sky unfolds above you. Alone or not, Earth is still a test hall, and perhaps that is enough. For now, your task is not to solve the silence, but to write your answers faithfully, knowing that one day, maybe, they will be read by others across the stars. The silence of the stars lingers in your thoughts, and yet the exam does not allow you to linger too long on cosmic loneliness. It shifts again, quietly, back towards something more intimate. The question before you now is choice. Your choices, humanity's choices, all the branching paths that could have been and still might be. If Earth is a test, then free will is one of its hardest sections. Are you truly choosing, or are you following a script written into your bones, your culture, your universe? And if you are in a maze, do you have the power to stray from its corridors, or only to pace back and forth within them? You begin by thinking of your own life. How many of your choices feel free? You pick what to eat, where to go, whom to love, what to say, but every decision is shaped by forces you did not choose: your birth, your language, your body, your culture, even the century you were born into. The examiners seem to watch closely here, as if asking, do you realize how much of your freedom is framed by walls you cannot see? Scientists still argue whether free will exists at all. Neuroscience shows that brain activity often precedes conscious decision by fractions of a second, as if your mind decides before you are aware. Does this mean your answers are already written before you put pen to paper? Or does awareness itself play a role, shaping outcomes in ways deeper than timing can measure? The debate remains open, and perhaps that uncertainty is part of the exam. History offers endless examples of choices under constraint. Think of Spartacus, the gladiator who led a revolt against Rome. Was it free will or desperation that made him rise? Or Joan of Arc, claiming visions and leading armies? Was she guided by divine command or her own fiery conviction? In both cases, the exam was brutal. The choices were costly, yet those answers, written in rebellion, echo still. Here's a quirky detail. In ancient Mesopotamia, people believed their lives were governed by the stars. Priests tracked celestial movements and declared fates. Choices seemed illusory. Destiny was already etched in the sky. And yet, even within that framework, people still prayed, bargained, and fought, as if something in them refused to believe they were only puppets. That refusal, you sense, is part of the test. Even if the maze is inescapable, you keep searching for a way out. Think also of modern experiments. In psychology, rats placed in mazes eventually find their way to food, but when the mazes are rigged, paths blocked, rewards shifted, The rats still try, still adapt, still search. Humanity may be doing the same, running through social, political, and technological labyrinths, learning, failing, adjusting. The exam is not about escaping the maze entirely, but about what you do within it. The larger scale of history shows patterns. Empires rise and fall, often in predictable ways: overexpansion, corruption, decline. It almost feels deterministic, as if civilizations are trapped in cycles they cannot break. And yet, each time individuals make choices that shape outcomes. Leaders, rebels, inventors, dreamers. Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Galileo turning his telescope skyward, Rosa Parks refusing to move. Small acts of choice that ripple outward, changing entire arcs of history. Scientists still argue whether these ripples are illusions. Some physicists imagine a multiverse, where every choice splits reality into new branches. In one universe you turned left, in another, right. In one, you stayed silent. In another, you spoke. If this is true, then every answer exists somewhere. The exam graded across countless versions of you. Does that mean your choices matter less or more? Perhaps the examiners are testing not what you choose, but whether you care enough to choose at all. You lie still, considering the paradox. If freedom is an illusion, why does it feel so heavy? Why does guilt ache, pride swell, regret linger? Illusions do not normally cut so deeply. Perhaps the test is to treat choice as real, regardless of what lies beneath. Here's another quirky story. In Norse mythology, even the gods knew their fate. Ragnarok, the end of the world when they would be destroyed. Yet they still fought bravely, even knowing the outcome was fixed. To them, honor was found not in escaping destiny, but in meeting it with courage. If Earth is a test, maybe that is the question. Will you live as though your choices matter, even if you suspect the walls are unbreakable? Think of more personal examples. You choose to comfort a friend instead of staying silent. You choose to share food when you could hoard it. You choose honesty when lying might benefit you. These small answers may not rewrite history, but they write you, and perhaps that is what the examiners measure most closely. Not the grand, world-shaking decisions, but the tiny ones that reveal who you are when no one seems to be watching. And yet, humanity as a whole is now facing its own branching paths. Technology grows faster than wisdom. Climate change threatens the stability of ecosystems. Nuclear weapons still lurk. Artificial intelligence awakens questions of control. These are questions not of inevitability but of choice. Will you destroy yourselves or adapt? Will you use fire to illuminate or to burn? The exam may be entering its most difficult section yet. Scientists still argue whether humanity has enough agency to steer its future, or whether larger forces, population dynamics, economics, planetary feedback loops, determine the outcome regardless of choice. It may be that you are free within limits, like a fish swimming in a bowl. You cannot leave the water, but within it, you decide where to turn. You breathe slowly, realizing that the weight of choice is both terrifying and liberating. If your life is a maze, then every step is still yours, even if the walls are fixed, and even if the examiners know the ending. You do not. For you, the test is real, the answers are real, and every choice matters in the moment you make it. So you carry the paradox gently. Free or not, you act as though you are free. Determined or not, you write your answers anyway. That may be the truest measure of the exam, not the outcome, but the willingness to keep choosing again and again in a maze whose walls may never fully reveal themselves. The maze of free will narrows, and now you sense something even more unsettling. The possibility that every step you have taken, every answer you have given, is already being recorded. If Earth is a test, then somewhere there may be a scorecard, a hidden ledger where each act of kindness, each moment of cruelty, each choice whispered into the dark is tallied. The exam may not be graded at the end alone. It may be graded continuously, every moment contributing to a balance you cannot see. You pause and let the idea settle. What if nothing is forgotten? What if every sigh, every laugh, every careless gesture is etched into a permanent archive? Some traditions have long imagined such a record. In ancient Mesopotamia, scribes believed the gods kept clay tablets of human deeds. In Christianity, the Book of Life appears, where names of the righteous are written. In Islam, angels are said to sit on your shoulders, one recording good deeds, the other bad. In Hinduism, karma acts as a cosmic account book, balancing every action across lifetimes. Across cultures, the idea recurs there is always someone or something keeping score. Scientists still argue whether memory itself can ever truly fade. On the cosmic level, information may be indestructible. Physicist John Wheeler once suggested, it from bit, that reality itself is built from information, and that every event leaves a permanent imprint. If that is true, then nothing you do ever vanishes. The ledger is written not in books or tablets, but in the very fabric of the universe. Think of history. Ancient scribes carved victories into stone, but often omitted defeats. Yet modern archaeology uncovers both, reminding us that no record is ever truly complete, no narrative entirely hidden. If there is a cosmic scorecard, perhaps it too preserves everything, not only the proud answers but the shameful scribbles scratched in haste. Here's a quirky story. In 1086, William the Conqueror ordered the Domesday Book, a massive survey of all land, property and livestock in England. It was called Domesday because it resembled the Last Judgment, an inescapable record of everyone's wealth and obligations. People feared it because it left no hiding place. Imagine Earth itself as one vast Domesday Book, every life inscribed without your permission, every choice audited by examiners you will never meet. The thought is unnerving. You wonder if there is a scorecard. What matters more, your intentions or your outcomes? If you mean well but fail, is that counted as success? If you harm without meaning to, is it recorded as guilt? Scientists still argue about morality's measurement. Is it results that matter most or the heart behind them? The examiners, if they exist, may grade by a standard you can never know. And what of collective acts? When nations go to war, when corporations pollute, when mobs commit violence, how are those scores tallied? Do individuals share in the weight of group actions? History suggests they do. After wars, entire generations carry scars. After collapses, whole cultures bear the mark of choices made by the few. Perhaps the exam's hidden scorecard does not separate neatly between one student and another. Perhaps the test is partly collective, an essay written by humanity together. Think also of memory at the human level. You may forget your small kindnesses, but those you helped may never forget. A smile offered in darkness, a meal shared in hunger, a word of comfort given when no one else spoke. These moments ripple outward, written into other lives. In that sense, the scorecard is not only cosmic but human. Each person carries fragments of one another's records, whether they know it or not. Another curious note, in the early days of the internet, people began to realize that everything online could be archived. Forgotten blog posts, deleted photos, stray comments, all could be preserved by servers and search engines. The phrase "the internet never forgets" became both a warning and a truth, and yet this is only a shadow of what the cosmos itself may be doing, archiving not only words and images, but every act, every thought, every motion. You let yourself imagine the examiners reviewing your record. Do they read every detail, or do they look for patterns, a general arc, a trajectory of growth? Perhaps the test is less about perfection and more about progress, about whether you are moving toward compassion and wisdom, even through mistakes. Scientists still argue whether consciousness itself might persist after death, carrying memory into new forms. If so, then the scorecard is not hidden elsewhere but within you. Every life an accumulation of all that came before. Karma, in that sense, may not be mystical but neurological, the imprint of your choices echoing across lifetimes, guiding your future exams. But the idea of being constantly observed, constantly recorded, carries unease. In modern times, surveillance cameras watch streets, algorithms track online habits, governments and corporations collect endless data. Many people resist, fearing the loss of privacy. Yet if the examiners are watching in ways beyond comprehension, then privacy never truly existed. Perhaps the test was always open book, always under observation. And here lies another twist. What if the scorecard is not external at all? What if the real ledger is inside you, the conscience that stirs when you lie, the peace that arrives when you act kindly, the unease when you betray yourself? Perhaps the examiners need no written record, because you already carry the grade within your own heart. A quirky reminder: ancient Egyptians believed that after death, the heart was weighed against a feather of truth. If it was heavy with wrongdoing, it was devoured. If light, the soul could pass on. The heart itself was the record, beating with memory of every act. You wonder if your own heart is such a record, heavy or light, balanced with truth or weighed down by regret. So you breathe deeply and let the idea soften. If there is a hidden scorecard, it is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to remind you that your choices matter, even when unseen. Every gesture is recorded, every kindness counted, every cruelty remembered. But the ledger is not about punishment alone. It may be about learning, about helping you see yourself more clearly. In the end, the scorecard may not be a final grade at all, but feedback, a gentle hand pointing out where you grew, where you stumbled, where you can still improve. The examiners may not be harsh judges, but patient teachers, letting you try again and again until the lesson is learned. And so you rest quietly, realizing nothing is wasted, nothing vanishes. Every answer you write matters because it is preserved. And perhaps, when the exam is finally over, you will read your own scorecard and see not condemnation, but the long story of your striving, imperfect, stumbling, but sincere. The thought of the hidden scorecard lingers in your chest, and yet another question rises gently in its wake. What if this test is not meant to be finished in one sitting? What if your exam stretches beyond a single lifetime, carrying you through cycles of return, rebirth, and renewal? If Earth is a test, perhaps each life is only one draft of your answer sheet, and when the ink runs dry, you are handed a new page to try again. Reincarnation has long been one of humanity's deepest intuitions. In Hinduism, the soul, or Atman, is reborn again and again, bound by the chain of karma until it learns enough to break free. Buddhism describes samsara, the wheel of existence, where beings cycle through lives as humans, animals, even gods, until enlightenment ends the cycle. The ancient Celts spoke of souls migrating from body to body like travelers changing clothes. The exam, in all these visions, is not a one-time ordeal but a long curriculum, each lifetime another lesson in an endless course. Scientists still argue whether memory, consciousness, or identity could survive death. Some researchers study past life memories in children, unexplained talents, or déjà vu as fragments of earlier lives. Skeptics call them illusions. Believers call them evidence. The debate itself feels like part of the test. How much uncertainty can you hold? How much mystery can you live with? History carries whispers of this belief. Pythagoras, the ancient Greek mathematician, claimed he remembered past lives, even describing a shield he had once carried in battle. Later in Rome, philosophers like Plotinus taught that souls descended into bodies as students into schools, returning after death to reflect on what they had learned. The test in this view was not punishment but pedagogy. Here's a quirky story. In Tibet, when a great spiritual leader called a lama dies, monks search for his reincarnation by offering children objects, some belonging to the lama, others not. The child who selects the correct items is believed to be the lama reborn. Whether true or not, the ritual shows the deep human yearning to believe that lives are chapters, not closed books. You imagine yourself this way, a student who has taken many versions of the exam already. Perhaps you once lived in an ancient village, carving stone, planting wheat. Perhaps you fought in forgotten wars, or walked as a healer, or built ships that crumbled long ago. The knowledge may be buried, but some trace remains. Your fears, your longings, your strange affinities for places or errors you never knew. These may be the echoes of earlier test papers, the lessons you carry into each new round. And if this is true, then death itself loses its sharp edge. It is not the end of the exam, but a recess, a pause before the next session. You leave the classroom for a while, only to be called back in when the next question is ready. That thought brings both comfort and weariness. Comfort, because you are never truly erased. Weariness, because the exam may stretch longer than you can imagine, lifetime after lifetime, until you finally master its subject. Scientists still argue whether the universe itself recycles. Theories of a big bounce suggest that after the Big Bang expands the cosmos, it may one day contract, collapse, and begin again, an eternal cycle of birth and rebirth, not only for souls but for stars and galaxies. If so, then reincarnation may not be limited to the human spirit. It may be woven into the fabric of reality itself, the exam repeating endlessly at cosmic scale. You think of karma again, not as punishment but as continuity. Every choice leaves a trace, and those traces shape the next life, like scribbles bleeding onto a fresh sheet of paper. If you live selfishly, you return with lessons unlearned. If you live kindly, you move closer to release. The examiners, in this view, are not strict graders but patient teachers, letting you repeat questions until you finally understand. Another curious note. In ancient Egypt, the scarab beetle, which rolls dung into spheres and buries them underground, became a symbol of rebirth. People believed the beetle's cycle mirrored the soul's death, burial, and emergence into new life. Even the simplest creatures reflected the truth of return. The exam was written into nature itself. But reincarnation also carries dilemmas. If you have lived before, why don't you remember? Why are the lessons hidden? Perhaps forgetting is part of the exam, to test whether you can find wisdom without relying on past answers. A test is only fair if you cannot copy from your old paper. Forgetting forces you to rediscover kindness, courage, and truth for yourself. And what of collective reincarnation? Some traditions suggest that groups, even nations, may be reborn, carrying unfinished business across centuries. Wars flare up in the same regions. Ancient feuds resurface. Cultures repeat mistakes. The exam seems to apply not only to individuals but to humanity as a whole, recycling its lessons until progress is made. You lie quietly, imagining the arc of it. Thousands of lives, thousands of questions. You stumble, fail, try again. You love, lose, love again. Each time the exam grows a little clearer, the answers a little wiser. The thought softens you. The exam is not about passing in one attempt, but about learning through persistence. Scientists still argue whether reincarnation can be reconciled with modern physics. Some propose quantum theories of consciousness, suggesting awareness may not be tied to the brain but to deeper structures of reality, capable of re-emerging after death. Others dismiss this as wishful thinking, but the question itself remains alive, persistent, refusing to close, as if the universe itself keeps nudging you toward it. And here is another curious detail. Many children, across cultures, invent imaginary friends. Psychologists explain it as creativity, but some traditions whisper that children remember more, glimpses of past companions, fragments of earlier lives. As they grow, the memories fade, replaced by the burdens of this exam's new section. You breathe deeply, and the thought becomes soothing. If this life is only one attempt, then mistakes are not final. Failures are not permanent. Each wrong answer is only a chance to try again. The examiners are patient, endlessly patient, waiting for you to learn what matters most. And so you drift into a gentle calm, imagining yourself not as a one-time test taker, but as a long traveler, returning again and again, carrying fragments of old lessons, adding new ones. The exam is vast, but you are given endless drafts. And one day, perhaps, when the lessons are finally absorbed, you will set down your pen for the last time, smile at the examiners, and step beyond the cycle into whatever lies beyond the classroom doors. You've wandered through tests of morality, choice, memory, and return. You've faced the possibility of simulations, scorecards, and cycles of reincarnation. Now, as the exam nears its end, you sense that the final question is not about knowledge at all. It is about how you carry the journey, how you live with uncertainty, how you rest within mystery, how you find peace even while answers remain incomplete. If Earth is a test, then perhaps its last section is not meant to be solved but embraced. You have been asked again and again, what will you do with your time? How will you treat one another? How will you bear the silence of the stars, the weight of your own choices, the fleeting nature of your days? The answers are not written in equations or carved into stone. They are written in your life itself. In each moment you give meaning to the world. You breathe slowly, remembering how many cultures have seen life this way. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome believed the universe would not always explain itself, but that wisdom lay in living with virtue regardless. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, not for others but for himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." It was a reminder that the exam does not demand certainty, only sincerity. Scientists still argue whether meaning is real or invented. Some say the universe is indifferent, that life is random, that the exam has no proctor, no score, no purpose. Others say meaning is woven into the fabric of being, that consciousness itself is a clue of cosmic intention. The examiners remain silent. Perhaps that silence is the point, to see whether you will write your own answer, even when no rubric is provided. History, too, offers examples of those who wrote their own endings. Socrates, condemned to die, drank the hemlock calmly, treating his death as one final lesson in courage. Galileo, forced to recant, whispered under his breath, "And yet it moves," refusing to let silence erase truth. Nelson Mandela, after decades in prison, chose reconciliation instead of vengeance, teaching a nation that mercy can be stronger than retribution. Their papers were not perfect, but they were honest, and perhaps that is the highest grade the exam allows. A quirky reminder comes from Japan, where the art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with veins of gold. The cracks are not hidden but illuminated, turning flaws into beauty. If Earth is a test, maybe your cracks are not failures but part of your final design, the gold ink of your striving shining where you thought you had broken beyond repair. You imagine the end of the exam now. The pages filled, the ink smudged, the questions answered as best you could. Do the examiners take your paper with solemnity? Do they smile? Or perhaps they simply nod, knowing that the answers were never about perfection but about presence. Maybe the test was always less about right or wrong, and more about whether you showed up fully, whether you cared enough to write at all. Scientists still argue whether consciousness ends with the brain or continues in ways unmeasured. But whether or not awareness lingers, you know this. Your actions ripple beyond you. The kindness you offered lives on in someone else's heart. The cruelty you resisted left fewer scars. The choices you made shaped the world for those who come after. The exam is not only yours, it is shared, a group project written by humanity together. And so, in these final breaths of reflection, you realize something gentle. If Earth is a test, then perhaps its true lesson is not knowledge or control or even survival. Perhaps it is wonder. To look at the world with awe, to hold one another tenderly, to marvel at the fact that anything exists at all. Awe may be the only correct answer, the one word written in the margin of every page. You rest now, letting the thoughts soften you. The exam is long, but you are not alone. Others have sat in these seats before. Others will sit after. Each of you leaves marks, lessons, scribbles for the next. The test is not cruel, it is simply vast, and in its vastness there is space for beauty. So you let yourself settle, knowing that whatever the examiners intended, you have lived it as best you could. That is enough. And now, as the last page closes, the classroom fades. The questions dissolve. The exam no longer presses on your chest. All that remains is a quiet peace, a softness wrapping around you like a blanket. The ticking of the cosmic clock slows and you realize you don't need to rush anymore. There is nothing left to solve tonight. Imagine yourself lying in a meadow at dusk. The grass is cool beneath you, the air carries the faint scent of earth, and the sky glows with the last light of day. Stars begin to appear, one by one, like gentle eyes opening across the heavens. You watch them without strain, without question, simply letting their glow wash over you. Your breath slows, in and out, the body loosens, the mind quiets. The exam, whether real or imagined, is set aside. You have written enough. You have lived enough. For now, the only task is to rest. Feel the weight leave your shoulders. Let your heart grow light. You are safe here in this quiet, in this night. The world can wait until morning. And as sleep draws near, remember the test was never meant to frighten you. It was meant to guide you, to remind you that every moment is precious. Every choice carries meaning, and every life is part of a greater story. Rest now, knowing you have done your part, and tomorrow will bring another page, another chance, another dawn. Good night, traveller. May your dreams be gentle.